the moral, the ethical, the intellectual, the astral, the cosmic, the celestial, house not made with hands.
The alchemical axiom or principle of vitriol. Visita interiora terrae, rectificando inveniis occultum lapidum. Visit the interior of the earth, and rectifying therein, you will find the hidden stone.
You know, if you don't transmute yourself first, you will transmute nothing.
The axiom of fixing the volatile and volatilizing the fixed.
Being able to weave hermetic principles into our social fabric.
Filling in the fractal spaces till we get to the most rarefied abstract plane of the celestial realm.
You know, that's alchemy, that's understanding nature.
Question everything.
Symbols are far beyond words, right? Symbols are the touch point where the mind enters into the sublime, incomprehensible, translinguistic depths of a direct connection with the ultimate that I would refer to as the divine.
There is truth in the Western esoteric traditions. It has been contributed to and refined and evolved over the course of millennia by what we can conceive universally to be the greatest minds to ever exist.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Philosophical Minds Podcast, an exploration of all things philosophical, alchemical, and esoteric. From the psycho-spiritual to the material-chemical nature of the all, join me and my guests as we inquire into the liminality of mind and matter and tend to the fertile soils of awareness and perception while facilitating an expanded consciousness from the individual to the collective. Thank you all, and let's get into it. All right, my guest tonight is Frater R.C., author, musician, magician, Freemason, Rosicrucian, adept of the Hermetic Order of Golden Dawn, master of divinity, and host of the Hermetic podcast. Is there anything additional that you'd like to add about yourself for the listeners?
Dear Lord, you put me on the spot right away, didn't you? Canadian. Proud member of the 51st state.
Alrighty then. So, just for the record, you could say whatever you want on this podcast. We keep it real here. No censorship, any of that stuff. So you feel free to say any opinions, whether I agree with them or disagree with them. That's all what I'm about. So
I figured that when I was scrolling through your episodes earlier today and noticed in one of the titles something that I didn't even have the balls to do in any of mine, which was have the word adrenochrome in the title of an episode.
Was that an old one? When was that?
I guess so, yeah. But I was like, I wouldn't do that. I mean, I've done lots of fake ads on my podcast for adrenochrome.
Yeah.
If you haven't heard those were fun. It's probably why I'm shadow banned on so many platforms now. And
yeah. So you're like an OG at all this stuff. You've got like a wild amount of experience and life experience, and it's really refreshing to listen to experienced magicians like yourself, guys like you, my good friend Ike Baker. I especially loved listening to both of you to converse back and forth because there's just so much nonsense and kind of crap out there these days. So it's always like I'm really grateful to hear voices like yourself out there communicating and kind of relaying this information in an authentic way. And it's funny because I remember, I don't know, I first came across you. I must have kind of caught you at the wrong moment or something, because I listened to some episode with you and I was like, this guy just seems like really grumpy. I don't know if I'd get along with him. He just seems like but I think you're just like in a bad mood or something. But the more I listen to you, I've continuously accumulated more and more respect and appreciation for you and your whole like life journey and your discipline, and it's really inspiring. And you have really good taste in comedy, and I see you posting a lot of things on your Instagram, and I'm like, this dude's like, I love, you're like a Tim Dillon fan. I'm like, yes, that's awesome. So respect.
A fellow Aquarius.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He's an Aquarius, which he thinks means he's a water sign, which is adorable, and he's adorable.
Yeah, I'm an Aquarius rising, so
almost as good, maybe better.
Yeah. So you speak like, I think I heard you mention you speak like 7 different languages or something to varying degrees.
That's all I've got at most, and some of those are very bad, of course. Yeah,
right.
And I compare myself to the friends I sort of grew up with who, like, I've sat at dinner tables where the majority of people there were over a dozen languages, proficient if not fluent, and it's just like, it just made me work harder. It made me work harder. I'm not naturally a cunning linguist. I have to work twice as hard in my experience, maybe 3 times, as everyone who's mediocre or natural at languages. But I love languages, and so I have put in a lot of the work to get proficient at some of them. Like, the only ones I've really been able to be conversational in are like German and Irish, which is Gaeilge in Irish, and I've gotten by with French in France when I needed to the extent that they didn't always switch to English. So
I've heard you speak some German on a podcast.
German, yeah. Kannst du Deutsch?
All right. I don't know.
Sprichst du Deutsch? You don't speak German. Okay,
No,
that's cool. Yeah. German is my main one, for sure. The one I'm best at. And that's just because Waldorf School, we learn it from grade 1 onward, along with French.
Yeah.
But my German teachers happen to be better teachers than my French teachers, so I didn't learn much French and learned a lot of German, and then went to Vienna for exchange. Yeah.
And I was listening to Demonta. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a stage name for me for performing music.
Jack White, Love Interruption. That's
the first music I've
one?
posted in ages. Yeah, I just did that like the other day, a few weeks ago.
I was really clean. I was like, wow, he's got a good voice. That was amazing.
I think I actually just did that for some students at the end of a hangout, and I was like, oh, hey, let me see if this mic setup works to capture guitar and vocals in one go, and it was not bad. So I did a quick little mix and master on it and popped it up there.
Yeah, because I've seen some of your older ones where you've posted. You're in some setting where you're sitting down playing your guitar and singing. The audio quality, though, it wasn't as good, but in that particular one that you just recently posted, it was like really good. I was like, nice, this is great.
Yeah, I've improved my setup for sure. Technology's come a long way, so yeah.
But so Rumpens Katane.
The Frater RC stands for Rumpens Katane. Broken of Chains. That was the motto given to me, bestowed upon me as a neophyte by my adept chief of Temple Theurgy, Frater Ka, who I actually just got one of his books I never had. This is one of his books. Let's see.
Okay, Magic Squares and the Tree of Life, Western Mandalas of Power. Awesome.
Now, this book, you might think it's a joke, but it's not. And that's what it is.
Whoa. What is all like interesting?
Yeah, it looks like that green code that scrolls down in the Matrix, which he put on the cover of his book. So, he's an Arabic adept and translator of many untranslated things from Arabic, and was a really good first teacher to have because of how his serious approach to everything, and that trained all the adepts who then trained me at Temple Theurgy, and it was a good experience to be around people who take the work seriously.
There was some wise words that I heard you say, and I think it was repeated from, I don't know if it was him or another individual, but look up before you look down.
Yeah, that was the main adept who trained me as an adept in our order. That was what he said when I was going through my initial 5-6 training and learning how to work with the vault. So I got, after the 5-6 initiation in LA, I stayed there a few weeks and did, you get some real hardcore daily hands-on training with the main praemonstrator of the order. And I went, 2.5 years later, I was declared sub-praemonstrator under him of the order. So clearly I did a good job learning from him and became a sub-praemonstrator and rewrote the grade material up to grade of Theurgy. I didn't get to finish it because we had to shut down our temple and then split from the American order and dissolved. We dissolved. I didn't do what a lot of people do, which is just take the material and give it a facelift and then do your own thing. I didn't feel that was right. I believe I agree with Nick Farrell that when a temple or a group leaves or schisms or however what you want to frame it, if you're going to continue on, you should redo the material and with your own spin on it at the very least, let alone go through it and see where it can be improved or where it has strayed from the spirit of things, or let alone the historical information, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think that's one of the problems that a lot of the modern spin-off groups are having, is they're still working with the same shoddy material that we developed as best we could in the late 80s and early 90s, which is what we had, right? It was very limited material. Even Zalewski's books were barely starting to come out around that time. And of course he puts his own spin on things, and so it wasn't like it was tapping into the source of the original Golden Dawn, because that was Stella Matutina to begin with. So
yeah, and yeah, I'm aware that you've been kind of all over the map with your studies and inquiries into spirituality, from anthroposophy. I think I listened to you discussing like Hasidic Kabbalah, Wicca, Druidry. I think I recall that you grew up with your parents who were kind of reading you like the Bhagavad Gita and the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and that's kind of like that was your upbringing. I thought that was really interesting. And as far as, I feel like I thought that you had some interview where you were discussing, I don't know if you were starting or continuing some Celtic order or something along these lines, and I wanted to ask you about if that's still going, or your progress with that, or what's going on with all of that.
Yeah, that was indefinitely delayed due to lockdown. So that was fast-tracked. When lockdown was declared, I had just secured the Ciceros and Lon Duquette to do a Hermetic conference in Northern California at the church I was working for. And they have a retreat center there. And so myself and the head woman there, the head priestess who runs it, DeTracy Regula, who is well-known, very famous in the occult world and well-known in California esoteric scenes, not just for being the producer of the animated Revenge of the Killer Tomatoes, but as Scott Cunningham's biographer, no less. She was one of Scott Cunningham's best friends and biographers, and she's a lovely lady, and I really enjoyed working with her. And so, yeah, she loved the idea of Hermeticon, which we were going to do at their amazing retreat center there in Sonoma County, right next to the Coppola Vineyard. But yeah, lockdowns happened, so everything got delayed and deferred. And so the Order of Celtic Mysteries, which is something I've been studying and working on putting together and making a reality in the way that I feel Yeats would want, since I was a teenager, since the mid-90s, I've been working on this, if not before, so like slightly before. So that is, I'm actually kicking off the nascent re-beginning of it this Sunday on the 26th with a lecture on the goddess Bridget, or Brie.
Well, this is good timing then.
Yeah. And there's people who are excited. It won't be fast going. We will hopefully in the next 3-4 years do the first of those initiations, the initiation of the cauldron over there in Ireland at a specific place, which I will reveal when people need to know. And we'll see how it goes. The thing, anyone interested, first thing you need to do is not go read the information. Don't read Yeats' stuff. Do not. If you do, you can't go through it. It's simple as that. And you could argue with the Golden Dawn initiations that reading them is not going to really spoil anything. But that's not the case with Yeats's ones. So I have got a workaround, I think, for people who have gone ahead and looked at it, but it's not ideal, and I would be very reticent to work with. You also don't want to work with the kind of people who, when they find out about a thing, instantly go and read all this stuff. Yeah. That's not the kind of person I've ever seen be successful at anything when it comes to the mysteries and spirituality. People who are greedy for information and have no understanding about the importance of really internalizing knowledge and gaining the lessons and the truths from it, right? It's like people who see the Kabbalistic cross as a preamble to doing a real ritual. It's like, I'm sorry, you haven't even done that ritual well yet. What are you doing? That part of the ritual. What are you doing moving on to the rest? And, there's another point of view on that one. A lot of people would be like, well, they just said it. They didn't vibrate those names to begin with. So, you're overdoing it a bit. But hey, they did have a meditation, or they did have there are unpublished papers showing that they took the Kabbalistic cross very seriously. And the meditation I developed from one of those is one of my students' favorite thing. So at least I can say that I'm doing my part to getting students to take every little step seriously. And that is what being a child of the first step really should be all about, is taking each step well.
Absolutely.
On your way.
I've had to restrict myself from the temptations to look forward in terms of, HOGD stuff. But I take advice from individuals like you or Ike, for example, and I value that. So as much as the temptation is there, I'm like, well, I want to protect and preserve and, provide the best experience as far as various initiations are concerned moving forward and whatnot. So I think that that's something that is important. So there was I listened to recently, I think it was like Brian Callen or something. He was on Rogan. He was talking about Henry VIII and how he created the Anglican Church. He was talking about because the Catholic Church wouldn't codify his divorce or something. I don't know. You're someone that is way more versed and obviously has more details to this sort of thing. I think that that's kind of up your alley. And I wanted to ask you about your experience as far as that is concerned, because that's something that you're very into. So tell me about like the Anglican Church. Why is that the variation of, I don't know, is that like a variation of Catholicism or like Orthodoxy?
Yeah. No, it's split from Roman Catholicism and became sort of a what you might call a state church these days. People see it that way. But one of my favorite lines actually is from one of the reformers, one of the theologians. I can't remember which reformer it was who said this, but it was such a British English way of phrasing. He said, the Church of England is merely the I think it's something like, let me see if we can say it well. He said, the Church of England is the garden pruned. So they've all this stuff that's built up in Roman Catholicism over the years, they just sort of pruned it away, which makes sense when you consider the same issues that Luther was having, right? Where they're like, pay us, all your money and you can touch this jawbone so that Granny gets 500 years off in purgatory. And even worse stuff than that was going on. It was absolutely off the rocker when the reformers caused the Reformation and started reforming. And the English Reformation was different than the other Reformations. There was a huge theological element to it, but there was also a huge political element to it. And so that made it different, which is why a lot of the trappings were argued and fought about in the church in England. And so, you had a period where it went through very puritanical, right? This was, what's his name? I did not expect to be talking about this stuff tonight, but was it Cranmer? I don't know.
Kramer.
So. But anyway, Cranmer. There was a Puritan phase, and then there was the Oxford movement that brought back a lot of the Roman trappings and ritual and incense and all of the high Anglicanism. Then that's what developed high Anglicanism. And so the Anglo-Catholic tradition exists in Anglicanism at the same time as the low Anglican church. So what you can think of Anglicanism as this: there's 10% is sort of high Anglican or Anglo-Catholic. Some of them want to rejoin the Roman Catholic Church, some of them don't. And it's a fact that if the problems that arose in Henry VIII's time arose today, the Anglican Church never would have split. None of the reformers would have split. If those issues had arisen today with the Catholic Church as it is today, it's changed so much, which it's not meant to do, but it does. Who can figure that one out? Let me know. And it wouldn't have caused a schism. There wouldn't have been no schisms today. But the Anglican Church was able to maintain, or has maintained over that time, the ability to have high Anglicans and the Catholic side, along with the low suit and tie, low church charismatics and evangelical aspect of Protestantism. So you have what you functionally have is a blend of low church Protestantism and evangelicalism, and as well as the Catholic ritual, also existing, at two extremes. And then in the middle you have what they call the broad church Anglican, which is just sort of middle of the road, and that's 80% of Anglicanism.
Yeah, biblical translations, and I don't know, one of the things I love doing lately is listening to all these different scholarly debates on things that are related to biblical stuff and early church history and how biblical canons were compiled and all the reasons why. And I'm like on a kick about it. So I know that you have, I think your book is like The Ethics of Understanding God, that you have one of your works, which I didn't realize you actually have a lot of books out there, a lot of things.
Well,
but
that's the only serious book, I suppose.
Yeah,
I mean, there's the Celtic Mysteries one, which I wrote in high school to graduate from high school, because we write a book instead of doing exams, and that did great service to me, because I used it to challenge my BA successfully at UBC, and so I was able to skip that unnecessary step. Not to disparage undergraduate degrees. If you're enjoying what you're studying, then you're in the right place. Like, you don't want to skip physics or skip basic astronomy if you want to be an astronomer. But given what I wanted to do, there was no need for me to go get like a undergraduate degree in something off topic to what I wanted to actually do with my life, and the quality was there. So, but yeah, my only real book and the Ethics of Understanding God is a academic technical work. It's my participation in a conversation that's been ongoing within the field of mystical theology for a long time. And what I essentially did was, in the first book I wrote, I was grappling with the hermeneutics of structuralist thought, and I was approaching it as a structuralist because that was how Yeats and Mathers were approaching the Celtic mysteries. They were like, which Irish god goes in which sphere? Right? Kind of ridiculous. But in the Golden Dawn system of magic, very useful thing to know, right? Like, we can work with that. Does it really make sense? No, probably makes more sense to read some Jake Stratton Kent and approach the gods that way in a goetic sense. So, keeping that in mind, it was an experiment in using structuralist methodology to finish something that Yeats and Mathers hadn't done. Hadn't completed, which was just allocating the gods to the spheres of the Tree of Life in the best way possible. And I used every resource that was published and available that I could access in the 90s. Obviously, I didn't learn Old Irish and go to Dublin and read the manuscripts from the medieval period. I just had access to secondary published materials. But I did use all of them that existed and read and took notes on all of them. So it was pretty cogent argument. And again, that's all been massively developed since then. But then in my second book, in The Ethics of Understanding God, what I'm doing is grappling in grad school with post-structuralism. Because, of course, once you study structuralism, you study post-structuralism. And I was fascinated by some of the ideas there, horrified by others, as we can see. these days. They're you know how, you know, when Peterson talks about the postmodernists and they've ruined society, and like first of all, that's painting with such a broad brush that it's quite accurate when academics come out and say that he doesn't understand post-structuralism or postmodernism. That's fair, but I think he's just using it a specific way to lampoon people who are using it maliciously to produce really evil things in this world. And I did address those in that book in one little phrase, because I never could have imagined that things would go so crazy. At one point in that book, I make the comment, now, of course, this could be taken too far, and people could take it into a state of utter relativism where nothing means anything anymore. But, you know, obviously that would be insane. Fast forward 20 years, that's exactly what people have done. Yeah. And even our governments got on board with it. Our law enforcement got on board with it. Right? Oh yeah, nothing means anything. People can come into your house, try and kill you, and we fully support them doing that because maybe they have a good reason. They can steal everything you own, and maybe they have a good reason. Hey, we shouldn't judge them because they don't like you. And don't we have to respect that they don't like you, and they have a right to kill and rape whoever they want. Like that's just who they are. Right? So that's post-structuralist thought gone way off the rails. And, you know, we're still dealing with that here in Canada. And it's horrifying. Absolutely. Like, yeah, we don't need to get too much into that. But there's some interesting things within post-structuralist thought. There's some interesting ideas that Nietzsche had and that Heidegger had, that Gadamer, who's my main influence, had. Hans-Georg Gadamer wrote Wahrheit und Methode, Truth and Method, and anyone who wants to understand hermeneutics should look at his philosophical hermeneutics. The essential shift that he created was from romantic hermeneutics, which were studied and written about by the romantic German philosopher Friedrich Schleiermacher, who believed that understanding essentially occurs by sort of you and I rising out of ourselves and uniting on a higher level and coming to a deep, intimate, full and perfect understanding of each other. Gadamer in the 20th century said, nonsense, that doesn't happen. That's never happening. That doesn't happen with you when you're reading a book. You don't understand the actual essence of what it meant to its author. Just like when you listen to a song, it has a meaning for you. Have you ever then heard the musicians talk about that song and you're like, wait, that song's about a hooker? You're like, yeah. Right. They're like, yeah. It's like, oh, well, to me, it's about how complicated it is with love when you love someone, but you also aren't certain of yourself. You know, all these things. So there you go. That's the hermeneutic problem. That's the hermeneutic problem. Yeah. And so Gadamer developed Schleiermacher's ideas further and has this idea that, you know, understanding is not the union of two souls on a higher level in complete cognition, but rather the fusion of horizons is a big term. So, like, you know, we have to share in a common meaning. We can't fully know each other, but we can have our horizons meet at a designated point where we share in that common meaning, and that's understanding. So looking at that, I took that as a model into some other post-structuralist ideas, and I took it to task saying, what does this mean for ethics? What does this mean for mystical dialogue? When we talk to God, when someone says, I talked to God and God told me to do this or that, what does that mean? What does it mean when a leader says, I talked to God and God said I should bomb this or that country? Right. So that's what I looked at in it. And how do we determine ourselves ethically as agents, as subjects in right relationship to the world and to each other and ourselves? And what's that look like? And how do we maintain that? Where does evil then arise? What is the good? So that's what I look at in that text.
I love all this stuff. Okay, I have a question for you. Do you have a distinction between morals and ethics?
Yeah, ethics are good and evil. Mm-hmm. So ethics is a subjective thing determined by the subject, right? And this is something people freak out about all the time, but it's actually the case. And morality is social norms and standards, legal codes, like what's right and wrong in society. But you know, it's only you will know if stealing that loaf of bread for your family is good or bad, right? Is good or evil. Obviously it's immoral because you're robbing someone, but is it unethical? Not if you need that bread to feed your family to stay alive. And so fidelity to the event of truth. That's what Alain Badiou, the French ethicist, who I took a lot of my ideas, whose ideas I think are right, in most situations. So, we have these, think about it when you take your vow in the Hall of the Neophyte. There's a moment, that's an event of truth. You've made this vow. If you break it, that's evil because that event defined you as being something good that you should then be faithful to. Now, when you break it, maybe it's because you never actually took it in the first place. It was never real. It was what Badiou would have called a simulacrum of an event of truth. Maybe that's the case. It never really happened. Sort of the same logic that Roman Catholic dogma uses for granting annulments. Like, you thought you were getting married, but you weren't really in it, so we can tell that now, and it never happened. Wow. But, those moments where, like, you fall in love, right? You fall in love with someone, and you're just like, I know this is the person I love. Well, what happens if it doesn't work out or if you leave them? Was it that you weren't in love, or was it that you did something evil? And that's something, of course, that you have to sort of search your own soul about. But there's different frameworks that ethicists have provided for getting some sort of understanding of that. And of course, Nietzsche has his own ideas of what is evil. He says, "Was ist das Böse, dreierlei," the unexpected, the sudden, or the obscure, the unbekannt, plötzliche, and Zufall, das Zufall, the coincidental, the unexpected, and the obscure. Those are what's evil. I don't know.
Yeah,
I had a lot of interesting ideas.
I find like the intersection of morals and ethics really interesting. I feel like that's like a really interesting.
Ethics is about right relationship, right? It's about having a clear conscience, be able to look yourself in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Morality's doing the right thing in society, and that's why justice systems take ethics into account. Why did you do what you did? Is what you did a good thing, or was it an evil thing? Right? That's why you can kill someone in the defense of someone else's or your own life, or you should be able to, because that was an ethical good. It was a moral wrong, in a lot of ways, because we'd say morally it's wrong to take someone's life.
Yeah.
But ethically, there are events in which that act is good.
Absolutely. So the Gospel of John, it said by Jesus, "I came not to bring peace, but a sword, to set daughter against mother and father against son," something like this. How do you interpret something like this verse?
I think that, that's an interesting one, right? Because that verse is most likely there because the Johannine community out of which the Gospel of John was written was in conflict with the Jewish communities around it. And that was a new thing for the Gospel writers to be experiencing, I think, to the extent that they were experiencing it. And it's why you have so much anti-Judaism in the Gospel of John. So there was Christian converts leaving Judaism and becoming Christians, but the Jews, in that around that community were saying, this isn't cool. We don't recognize Jesus as the Messiah, and so the gospel writers clearly addressing in his time and place that problem of, what do you do when you have sons and daughters and husbands and wives becoming Christian, but their partners are not anymore? In the previous Gospels, it didn't seem to be a problem, and the history attests to the fact that, a lot of women became Christians because Christianity was so empowering to females. It was very empowering to women in a way that other religions weren't so much, and gave a lot of pride of place to the role of the females in the life of Jesus, the three Marys being a prime example, right? Whereas, what was your alternative if you were a pagan is, being a temple priestess or a sacred prostitute or who knows what. But there was a different sense in Christianity that there was a higher calling of the female. And I think that really spoke to the pagan as well as Jewish communities who both had this sense of the divine feminine, whether it was through the idea of the presence of God on earth, the Shekhinah, or whether it was just understanding that Sophia had been marginalized in pagan culture, perhaps. That could have been it as well. Again, we'll never really know exactly what was going on with the community that produced the Gospel of John, but we can see in the text that clearly that was a major issue, right? Just like when Paul's writing to the churches to like stop having pagans over to your Eucharist and then having orgies with them afterwards. Like, that's not good. Stop doing it. Why? Well, they were doing that. And so that's how we look at that text hermeneutically in hermeneutics. That's how we interpret it. What does that mean for us today? Well, I would say, yeah, if you see someone, if you yourself are at odds with your family because you're doing the right thing or following your heart, it's like, well, Jesus didn't always come to bring peace. Yeah, that's how I would use that in a homily or a sermon to a community today. If people were struggling with that, that would be an important text to help maybe set people at ease. It's like, look, everything's not always going to be hunky-dory.
Yeah, so I'm curious to ask you, like, what is your takeaway from maybe like the general message of what you take away from I don't know if you would combine the Hebrew scriptures with kind of like the New Testament stuff, if you feel like that's like a coherent thing, or if there's obviously a lot of in between and various interpretations of all of that. But as far as the message is concerned of Jesus, or maybe there's a distinction between Jesus and Christ and the Christos, like, how do you sort of view and reconcile all of these things, and what someone may take away from reading these things from either an exoteric or an esoteric perspective?
Are you asking me what I think the role of the Jewish scriptures are for Christians?
In particular, I'm curious about your interpretation and view of what Christ and the Christos represents, and like, what is the message and the meaning that is intended for people to be able to grasp from when they're reading these scriptures. What do you think it was that was the intention? What was the message that was intended to be conveyed, and what individuals were, what was hoped to be interpreted from these scriptures?
From the
maybe
Jewish Bible or the New Testament? Again,
well, this is what I realized, is that maybe there's different things from the Jewish and the Hebrew scriptures as there is, like the New Testament stuff. But that's also something I would just be curious to ask you, like, what your opinion is on all of that. Because,
well, I really like in Vienna, I had some Kabbalah lessons from a Hasidic rabbi, and he's still alive. Actually, I hope to get him on the podcast before he dies. He did fascinating research on the reincarnated souls from the Holocaust in modern day people, and then he researched that. He has a book on it. His name's Rabbi Yonasan Gershom. He also wrote a book on Kabbalah and Star Trek. But these are like old 90s books, so they're like done on CorelDRAW, and the graphics are early 90s style. Just heads up in case you find any of his books. But his research was fascinating on the reincarnation stuff, and I'd love to read that book one day, though I haven't gotten around to it, I must admit. But his point to me on Jesus was all he was a great rabbi who emphasized the two most important laws of the Torah. And so that's how they see it. He's not the Messiah. He just was a wise rabbi who was like, look, these are the two main laws: love God and love each other. And so that's not news. And another rabbi teacher I had in theological college, his point of view again was, for Christians, Jesus is the for Christians, Jesus is the Messiah, and for Jews, meh. That was his point of view. You know, it's again just not as big a deal, but that's okay. So, yeah.
And so, you're a Golden Dawn guy, and like, as far as like the esoteric understanding of Christ is viewed, what's your take on all that?
Well, I think the powerful message of Christ is that we rise again, right? That we really are spirits that rise up again out of this body and death.
Yeah. So we've got the common biblical canons. I think there's a couple additional books in the canon of like the Ethiopic Bible, as there is maybe in the Catholic version, as there is like the modern, I don't know, non-denominational Christian churches are concerned or whatever with the like new versions. So then we've got that. Then we've got like the Nag Hammadi, and then we got like the Dead Sea Scrolls. We've got all these various texts. I'm curious, what do you feel like are some of the most valuable ancient scriptures and texts as far as spiritual truths are concerned that you yourself consult?
So one thing is, I'm not like a lot of Christians who value the Bible very highly. I've never considered the Bible to be that big a deal, to be honest, despite spending most of my life studying biblical theology and I like language, so I love the history and the textuality of language, but I don't consider those writings to be written to me, and they aren't. They're written for those people at that time, and this is what we always say when we study hermeneutics. It's like there's a meaning we can extract for us today, but it's based on understanding what that meaning was for them in those times. For example, like modern Christianity is all about a personal relation with Jesus Christ. If you went to early Christians and talked about that, they would think you are nuts. They would not know what you're talking about. Jesus has nothing to do with your personal relationship, they would say. Jesus is about communal salvation for the body of Christ. And the body of Christ is all the people who gather to worship Christ together. And by doing that, we find salvation as a community together in the ecclesia, in the church. And of course, then we're resurrected in our bodies afterward. Now, that said, I think Scripture is great. There's a lot of wisdom in Scripture, and again, the stories are amazing, and they all have so much complexity and meaning, not just in them, but behind them and around them, that they should never be ignored. And there's tremendous lessons we can extract. But again, to me, God isn't limited to the Bible. That is a very sola scriptura Protestant notion that the text is. They've elevated the text almost of the Bible to replace Jesus. You know, and I think the corpus of the community matters more. That's why I was quite happy as a Roman Catholic for a short time, because the idea that like this is about all of us coming together and being part of this great historical church that's been around for forever, and it has all these great attributes and wonderful people, and you'll find so many amazing people. Still, a lot of my best friends will always be Catholics. But again, there's not room in it for everybody, sadly. It just isn't that kind of place. And I was always before I was any of these things, I was a hermetist, and so I connect better with the writings of the Hermetica and those ideas, which were, participated in by Christians in Alexandria. And so, the idea that God is ultimately beyond all the other gods, that there's light, that there's nous, that there's a creation and a reality above all the gods, and maybe even Jesus. That idea makes sense to me as this sort of fundamental reality being composed of consciousness or spirit, as I like to think of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I really am grateful to interact with guys like yourself, because you have such a knowledge of all of this from an experiential standpoint, and from somebody that's immersed in it from kind of both sides, which is kind of a rarity in terms of like the grand scheme of
What do you mean by both sides?
like I mean both sides as in the common the zeitgeist of individuals would conceive of magician versus Christian uh thing is concerned. Like it's kind of like interesting when so there's a
Yeah, it's
common
like people say Christians can't be occultists. It's like it's like the other way around. It's
right.
most occultists are Christian
Which
historically.
is
Yeah,
it's like kind of one of those funny
it's
things
this.
that you realize, and when you're on the outside of it, you have this perception of these things being like kind of like diametrically opposed, and then you come to this realization. It kind of like it's kind of like a mind blowing thing, but it's really fascinating, and I think where a lot of people can have a lot of learning, um, at least for myself personally, when I encountered this sort of thing, like it was this like kind of awakening moment for me where uh, it's like, oh, these things can exist in this harmonious sort of relation to each other. It's not like my parents or my parents were taught. It's not like their culture and their religion was concerned that I was sort of taught. It's like, oh, there's this whole other reality out there and this whole other possibility of reconciling these things. There's these different interpretations. There's these different ways of viewing religious texts and whatnot. Because for me, I'm kind of come from like a more fundamentalist religious upbringing, so it was like it was very enlightening and interesting for me to be able to encounter certain individuals and their perspectives and kind of learn from this sort of thing. And it's something that I really appreciate, being able to be like, oh, this is so cool. Like you can have this respect and this reverence and this interest in um, these texts and these scriptures, but it's not like this rigid ideology where we're being so dogmatic about things and kind of coming up with these interpretations that are like stone all the gays and fucking demonize all the drugs and like like this rigid sort of ideology, I guess. And so that's why I always like love talking to guys like yourself that are pretty immersed and familiar with being able to bridge these gaps. And there's not a lot of people out there, as far as I'm concerned, that are able to do that and that have the background and the experience and the knowledge and the understanding of the languages and the study like within the scriptures and whatnot, because you can get somebody that can say something and be like, I have this opinion about such and such, but they can't actually tell you the biblical scriptures, or they can't, they don't have any familiarity with it. So it's kind of, it doesn't hold as much weight. But when you got guys like yourself, you got guys like, Ike, for example, like you guys have this broad familiarity with these texts. You guys have this like this personal relationship with these things, but you're also, you've got this like magical background, and you've got this more broadened esoteric background. And this is like, to me, I'm like, this is what I love, because there's just, to me, there's not a lot of it, and I learn a lot from it, and it's something that continues to inspire me. So yeah.
There's probably more Christian magicians than people think, except we do have to be a bit more quiet than other people. I'm, life put me in circumstances where I was able to say, fuck it, and just roll with it, and just, and yeah, God's plan is trumps my own. So whatever designs I had on the future were altered, and the path was set before me, and I chose to take it. And again, I think it's actually a core part of our understanding of the tradition that's been sort of lost, right? When we talk about the Golden Dawn, most people, even academics, don't even necessarily realize that we're talking about a Rosicrucian tradition. And when I mention that sometimes to some people, you can see they're struggling to understand how that is, or they think it's like a secondary thing or something. But it's like, no, it's a core thing, right? And that's because it goes back to the Fama Fraternitatis, and people don't read the inner order stuff, and they would see how exactly R plus C it is, and that Rosicrucian manifestos were based on Hermetic spirituality. We see that because they included Dee's Monas Hieroglyphica on the covers, or on at least one of the covers, referenced it throughout, referenced a secret language, which may or may not have been Enochian. That's the theory put forth by Dr. Terry Burns, that the language referenced in the manifestos is a reference to the Enochian of Dee and Kelly. And in John Dee, we see, what did he read right before? Again, this is Burns's research. What did he read right before writing the Monas Hieroglyphica? Well, he read the Codex Marcianus, which earlier today I heard you talking about with Tobias Churton, who I love. I love him, and I don't think I love him in spite of. I think I love him because partly of his wonderful British takes on things. He has, and not just his takes on things. Like sometimes he says things like, that's so British, but then he'll even say things like, you were like, how is this word pronounced? He's like, oh, it's Theosabaya. It's like, I guarantee it was not pronounced that way, but I love that's that British imperial attitude. It's just like, it's pronounced the way I say it. Of course it is. It's just like, and it's just, it's wonderful. We're back into an age of imperialism apparently. So hey, let's enjoy what bits of it we can. But the Hermetic core that we see from the Hermetica, and those ideas from Zosimos of Panopolis onward, right, is this idea that there could be Christians and Jews, and this is evident in the Rosicrucian manifestos. The brothers around Christian Rosenkreuz are of different religions. There's Muslim Arabs, and there's people from all around the world of different faiths. And that is an idea we see in the original Egyptian Hermetica. We see this idea of there's something beyond all the gods. There's nous, light. And that's a good translation for it, though that even them, they knew that light was just a placeholder word for what light represented, just like the physical sun is the dispenser of light to our world, but it's only a representative of the invisible sun that truly shines throughout the universe. And so, again, that's a core. The Golden Dawn turns out to be far more hermetic than any of us probably thought it was. And that Hermeticism, or Hermetism, which became Hermeticism, journeys through that Rosicrucian tradition up to present day from John Dee. He read the Codex Marcianus, he read Zosimos' idea. A year later, he banged out the Monas Hieroglyphica. He passes on, and then, just as Nostradamus predicted, some brothers in the mountains of Germany arose and produced these manifestos that led to this whole other revolution of mystical subcurrents, shall we say.
I'm not familiar with those Nostradamus predictions. I want to talk to you
about
if
you look, there's a prediction. I think if you look at the version of the Fama, the best version of the Rosicrucian manifestos, of course, is the one done by Jocelyn Godwin. And the paperback's okay, but the hardcover is gorgeously done. So anyone who's going to get that book, get the hardcover, because it's got the Monas right on the front cover, and it's a beautiful edition. But I think he talks about that, either Godwin or one of the other academics who writes commentaries and intros talk about, I believe it was in that book, where they talk about a Nostradamus prediction from 75 years earlier that says at this time, and it pinpoints the date, place, and time more or less in Germany where the Rosicrucian tradition emerged around, Johann Valentin Andrea.
Wow.
So,
do you mind if we
fascinating stuff.
Yes. Do you mind if we take a quick break real quick? I gotta
no problem.
Okay, cool.
Rock and roll.
Let's do it. All right. Sorry. Yeah. I didn't want to interrupt it because I was so intrigued by what you were saying, but I had to pee really bad, so glad we got that over with.
No problem.
Okay, so I'm curious, what's your take on like Elohim in Genesis as a plurality? You know, there's like this debate on is it gods, is it God, is it the feminine and masculine? Like what does this mean as far as you're concerned in your interpretation?
Well, it's used in two distinct ways in the Hebrew Bible. It's used at one point to refer to a council of gods. I think that's in Isaiah, if I recall. I don't know. So someone go ask Wes Huff, my fellow Canadian. He's made waves, hasn't he?
He's gonna have a lot to encounter coming up.
He's made big waves.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm all for biblical scholarship becoming more mainstream. I think that won't do us any harm, even if it's coming from a Baptist, hardcore Baptist believer. It's like, yeah, if you're going into the original manuscripts and you're working in those original languages, like, yeah, bring it on.
Let the
People
games
need to
begin.
understand this stuff. Yeah, absolutely. People should engage with these texts in that way. It's a lot of fun. But what was the question?
Elohim.
Oh, Elohim.
Yeah,
so it's clearly used to refer to a council of gods at one point, like of the Elohim, and it's used in a plural sense there, even though, but in Genesis, it's not referring to plural gods. That's pretty obvious. It's a masculine plural that we have, but I think I can't remember exactly the points that Wes made, and I certainly am not the same kind of Christian that he is, but I really appreciate the rigor. Like, you got to appreciate anytime someone's like,
at least he has
changes their entire life plan, gets hardcore about it, goes and learns the stuff. Like, that's what you want from faithful people, is people who, what's the Protestant phrase? Faith seeking understanding. That is a very powerful idea, and it's not a bad book. I believe it's written by a Presbyterian, and so that sort of tradition. So, that's Congregationalism. There's a lot of good things about Congregationalism and Presbyterianism. The pastor is elected from the congregation, the people itself, so you get hired by your church and not imposed upon them. That's a really beautiful, very authentically spiritual thing. It's emerging and arising from the community itself, and that's healthy, as opposed to, hey, here's the new priest who's going to, molest your kids. Deal with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's exciting too. I think it's cool to see him, or like an individual such as him and what he represents, to be on Rogan, instigating this sort of debate between these subjects, because it's only going to further the exploration and interest in these subjects. And it already is. There's tons of channels that I'm tuned into they're like, Wes was wrong about this, but they did it.
Oh, sure.
Picking apart all this stuff.
I just can't believe that. The reason no one ever debunked Billy Carson before is because, we didn't think we needed to.
Right.
Clearly this guy's nuts. And what the stuff he's talking about is nonsense.
A lot of low-hanging
fruit.
Yeah.
He's claiming he can read Akkadian.
You're like, come on.
You don't go after those people usually, because they're, if you can't see what they are, then,
and it's
then sort of
one of my big bones to pick with guys like Billy, which I like a lot of his stuff. It's good and it's interesting and it can expand your mind, but there's these things where these guys will talk about the emerald tablets of Thoth. They're not talking about the emerald tablet. They're talking about the emerald tablets of Thoth.
See, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize he was pretending that he was actually talking about. I thought he just was renaming the tabula smaragdina, but he's actually talking about a completely different thing. I didn't realize that, which is again a debunked forgery, and that was something that was surprising. I mean, we need people like him. We need people that are willing to go off into the. You see the golf ball fly off to the right. It's not the craziest thing to have someone just wander off the opposite direction and say, hey, I'm just going to go look for it and see what I find. It's like, sure, we know you're not going to find the golf ball because we all saw it go that way, right? But he might find something. You always got to have room for that kind of play in our reality. In creation, we need play. This idea of play is actually a postmodern, post-structuralist idea that's very powerful. And I don't think, it's helpful to even label these terms necessarily as post-structuralist and structuralist all the time, right? Sometimes there's some of these ideas should transcend categories and just be useful ideas and actions to be done. And the idea of loving God and loving your neighbor is not a Christian idea. It's not a Jewish idea. It's a human idea, right?
Yeah.
Treat each other well.
Absolutely. Guys like Billy and people promoting a lot of these sort of ideas, I think it's cool because they draw a lot of attention to things like the Enuma Elish and the Epic of Atrahasis and like these sort of more ancient creation myths and whatnot. And there are a lot of parallels to be drawn between these Sumerian, Akkadian, Mesopotamian myths in correlation with like things like Genesis, or like the story of Noah and the Ark and whatnot. There's a lot of correlation. There's a lot of parallelism there. But then, yeah, like sometimes when you can go a little too far with it and you start referencing these.
It's not the ideas, I think, that he goes too far with, because maybe we were made by interdimensional aliens that are harvesting gold, and I mean, after a good night of chilling out, I'm down for a bit of that. But it's not the ideas that are the problem. It's the certainty. First of all, that was something I talk about a lot in the ethics of understanding God, is the danger of certitude. Right? It's a very dangerous thing, certitude. It's the step before totalitarianism and authoritarianism. Right? It's not it's I'm right, you're wrong, and then one step later, I'm right, you're wrong, and if you don't agree with me, you're dead. Right? That's dangerous stuff.
Yeah.
So Billy Carson's like, lying about a whole bunch of stuff about being an expert on things he doesn't even know the very basics on. And anyone with even one day in grad school studying any of the topics he's talking about knows he's just grifting, or what it looks like is just grifting. He may be sincere. I don't know the man's heart. So again, right? I think morally what he's been doing with his career is very repugnant, but ethically, was it evil? That only he would know that. Only he would know that, right? And now he has a chance to look in the mirror. He's responding and reacting to the situation like he knew he was bullshitting people for money the whole time. That's how his response seems to be now that he's under scrutiny. But the problem with what he was doing all along was his methodology, right? Leading people to believe that this is how we come about and just arrive at knowledge, whereas it's the opposite, right? People have this is one of the big differences between people who have gone to university and who haven't. And I hate to say that there is a difference between those people, because I wish there wasn't, but there is, right? So the difference is, the first thing I do when I come up with any idea or experience or have any thought is I try to see if I can take it apart. I spend way more time trying to discount my experiences or break my own ideas or theories than I do trying to prove them. It's not about trying to prove them. It's trying to take them apart. And the ones you can't take apart are the ones that eventually end up being what we call our beliefs, I think. So, yeah, he wasn't really methodologically sound in any way. And I think he might have known that. I think he did know that. There's a lot of people who I think are doing that. Like Robert Edward Grant was someone who I thought I respected. He makes he's very rich. I guess he knows finances and probably is very good at math because he's very good at geometry and very successful. Yeah. And then when I saw him do the Gaia show, someone loaned me a sign in and I checked it out. I was like, oh, I'd love to see what an actual scientific thinker is going to uncover. And he did the same BS that people always do on those shows, where they speculate a bunch of things and then they assume them. So one of his episodes, he ends with what is the Philosopher's Stone? Could it be this? Could it be this? You know, some
Yeah.
people say it's this rock that's crystallized in the heart of yogis, and when they die, you can see the rock. Maybe that's the Philosopher's Stone. We'll never really know. And then the next episode starts with, now that we have definitively proven that the rock crystallized in yogis is the flaw. It's like, okay,
Oh
I
my
just
God.
lost all respect for you entirely forever just because you can make a lot of money and you got a good head of hair doesn't mean you aren't a total whack job when it comes to areas that you've not done any serious study in. I'm sorry.
One of
So,
my
yeah.
biggest disappointments is Timothy Hogan and his claim to
No,
be.
him admitting that he's choosing to continue to believe and teach things he knows are not historically true. That was brutal. Yeah, that was actually the only time I tuned into the Y files to see his little breakdown of the emails he got back from Tim Hogan saying because he debunked him, right? And the guy was like, look, I know these things aren't actually true, but I just choose to live my life believing that they're true because I like the stories. So that's a mythology. It's like, that's fine. And so at least he came clean about that. He's just going to continue believing them. And I love the Templar stuff. Like, yeah, the version of the Templars I have in my head, I much prefer to the reality of them, but what are you going to do? Well, oh, you're muted.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, tell
Yeah,
me what you think about the
I
Tim
mean,
Hogan Templar stuff.
I interviewed Tim, and it was an amazing interview. Great impression, and the things you spoke about seemed pretty genuine. But when I speak to a lot of people, like when he makes his claims about the Grand Master of the Knights Templar, things like this, and his lineage from people that are more versed and more involved in those things, as far as everybody else is concerned, it's just not it's not the case what he's claiming, and it's kind of a bummer. He speaks good, but people that were formerly with him have reached out to me, and it's kind of a bummer thing, but it's like there's at least some level of charlatanism going on there. And I like the idea of the arcs and the multiple arcs that he was aware of that were in various locations and whatnot, and so on and so forth, that have been postponed to be revealed, and all of this. And I don't think that it's impossible that there are arcs of the covenant in certain locations and whatnot. I'm not saying that that's like an impossibility, but I feel disappointed, I guess, with his claims around these subject matters, and like his whole mm, yeah, his whole spiel about all of that. It's kind of a bummer, but you know.
And well, we're still digging on the island in Canada, in Halifax, in Nova Scotia.
Well,
What's it
I was
called? Bear Island? What's it
yes,
called?
I was just
Yeah.
actually talking to
We're
my
still
friend about
digging, looking for Shakespeare's handwritten
yeah.
plays.
I was talking to one of my buddies that lives in Nova Scotia, and he's an alchemist dude. He makes like spagyrics and stuff, and I was telling him about like my disappointment with some people that were like in the, well, I don't know what the role is considered, but basically like second under um Tim Hogan and the Knights Templar Collegia thing that they had going on or whatever. But he had communicated with me, and he was like, yeah, there's this whole falling out thing and all this stuff.
What's
And
the falling out around? Is it around just the lack of historicity in some of his beliefs?
well, it was there was other things, like apparently, according to my friend, that's I trust, he's a pretty good dude, which I'm gonna interview with me and Ike are probably gonna interview him on the Etherica podcast, but he was telling me like there's like all these rumors being spread about him through Tim and a bunch of like unfortunate things like that. Like Tim was spreading rumors about him and his family, and he was claiming all of these things that weren't true. And this was from a person that was basically like him and Tim had started the Templar Collegia.
I have good friends who are involved in Templar stuff in a variety of different ways. And I honestly, I think it's all great. Like, I love it.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't think, I don't know what the problem is, why people can't just sort of own their mythology. And when they come to a dead end with something historically, just be like, okay, this didn't pan out as we thought, and just pivot and focus on, if you want to keep, if you want to discover veritable truths and facts that are buried in history and lost. There's so many great ones still to uncover. Like, do you follow the archaeology stuff going on online? I don't know whether it's World of Antiquity or any of those guys. Like, they're just reporting on all the stuff going on in archaeology. It's just daunting to me every time I check out, and I watch a lot of that stuff. Same with like astronomy and all that. There's so much new stuff coming. You don't need to hold on to like multiple arcs of the covenant. I mean,
Yeah.
go check out what groups of Freemasons are doing with like charting hyperspace or something.
Yeah.
Go help dig holes on Bear Island, and maybe there is someone buried something down there. Someone did like there was a massive human project underground there, the likes of which we probably never haven't even begun to understand. It's fascinating.
Absolutely.
So there's real mysteries to discover in this world. It's sad, I think, when people get hung up on ones that likely are disproven. And some stuff can just be mythology. The Templar stuff, the noble idea of knights, like the Round Table, or Christian warriors or mystic monks, that's all good stuff. We need more of that in our culture. So I think communities or groups that want to explore those ideas and promote those ethics of life are really healthy when they let themselves be healthy.
Is not like I really enjoyed. I love that. Like when I talk to Tim and I talk to him and he like speaks of like morals and ethics and like these things, he's very beautiful in the way that he speaks about these things. And then, it's just this like bummer kind of thing when he introduces these ideas of these arcs, and like he kind of gets people hyped up about these locations, and they'll be like, yeah, well, we can't release them. Like we were gonna release them, but then COVID happened, and then like it's kind of like stringing people along into this thing, and then like he gets this thing on Gaia, and then he's kind of like promoting it, and then like he's promoting this like lineage of all of this stuff on Gaia that people that I've talked to that are like more involved with the lineages of Templarism and all of this sort of thing are like, dude, this is like way off. And I'm just like, I don't fucking know, but okay. All I can do is defer to people that I really trust and I have an intimate connection with. But so that's my take on it, and that's kind of like my limited.
I wish I knew more about it, brother, but I know very little about it. I really enjoyed Wasserman's book on the Templars and the Assassins when I read it, like when it came out the same, and that was fun. And I've never read Holy Blood, Holy Grail, or any of that stuff. But again, maybe I'll get into some Templar stuff in the Masonic world at some point. Who knows?
Well, you're a Mason, right?
No, yeah, technically, but apparently I have to redo EA. So we'll see.
What's EA?
Entered Apprentice, the first degree.
Okay.
So I've been a first degree since 2004.
I don't
But they
know.
just sort of, the lodge I joined sort of was, they didn't they weren't on top of it. They were disorganized, and so they weren't really doing any teaching or training of people in between ceremonies, and that was like, that made it impossible for me to continue because they weren't doing their part of like Yeah, that didn't. I don't want to. I've talked about that enough. We don't want to waste more time with that. But anyway, and now I'm hanging out with good guys and good friends in town and a good group. And I've been to like lodge tons of times in the last few months, not as a member, but as a seeker. And I show up after their meetings and hang out and get to know the people there. And it's nice, especially it's really nice these days because something's happened since 2004, which people don't really do anything anymore. I've noticed, especially in a town like I live in, which has the ignominious nickname ubiquitously of No Funcouver.
Okay.
So we call it, yeah, people, you'll hear people say that on the street all the time.
No
That's No
Vancouver.
Funcouver, No Funcouver, yeah.
What's
For our
like Vancouver's
2000.
no fun? Is that what they're trying to say?
No, we don't. The city doesn't do things like
Oh
New Year's
man.
Eve, no fireworks. When the year 2000 rolled around, we had a candlelit vigil and shut down the buses because we were worried about bombs.
You gotta change that
It's
to
just
Vancouver.
yeah. So I'm trying to change that with my conference, the Nokia
Yeah.
Con and the Arcane Research Society, doing in-person events here, 3 events here per year. And so that's going to hopefully add some spice and fun for the esoteric communities in the Pacific Northwest. And
Yeah.
Vancouver's still a great city, and it's a better time than ever for Americans to visit it because our dollar tanks so much. Your money's like gold here now,
Mm.
so that's really good for y'all who want to come visit Canada, and it's good for us too. It's a win-win right now, and we'll see what happens in the future.
It's funny. I remember like when I first started out doing my podcast, that people that I were listening to, and I was thinking about like I didn't have a lot of friends that were Freemasons or anything like this, and I had this very like conspiratorial notion towards secret societies and Freemasons and all this sort of thing. And I was like, I have this part of me that can relate to people that think about, like the Freemasons, like, oh, the Freemasons, they're up to who knows what or whatever. Now, like, some of my best friends are Freemasons. Some of my best friends are like in these orders and all this stuff. And I'm like, these are the dudes I respect the most. And it's just funny. Now I'll see like these accounts, like these people on Instagram, and they'll be like, oh, this fucking Mike Tyson fight is this Freemasonic ritual and da 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 da. And I'm just like, oh fuck. Like
We wish it was a Freemasonic ritual. Anytime people think something's like run by the Masons or the OTO,
yeah.
that's always my response. It's like, yeah, they wish.
Yeah,
They wish it
exactly.
was. Like the OTO secretly runs the United Nations. Like, yeah, they would. I mean, that would be kind of awesome.
I
Like,
know.
the
It's
law is
fucking
for all.
hilarious.
And
Yeah.
yeah, but no, I'm sorry. Yeah, and it's funny the groups that have the reputations aren't the ones that deserve the reputations. Like there's some left-hand path groups or the Voodoo world, the Haitian Voodoo world, like
Mm.
with Jason Louv exposed massive. Where
Mm.
I don't think he exposed it, but he shone a bright light on the child trafficking issues in those communities and all kinds of stuff. There's a lot of
That's
groups with way
crazy.
darker stuff going on than in masonry. But again, these things are when these groups are big, like masonry, it's like there's everything's going on at somewhere in some pocket of it somewhere. Like, you got skull and bones people, you got all these different societies. Whereas like OTO is the opposite. It's like they don't have enough members to be running much more than themselves. And they've been struggling to do that. I mean, unlike the Golden Dawn, which has existed in an unbroken lineage since it began with, not we don't have lineage in the Golden Dawn, so it's not actually lineage. But as far as normies are concerned, it's lineage. Like we haven't had a cessation of the orders, right? We're linked orders. The orders are linked, shall we say, wink wink.
Yeah.
And so, whereas the OTO and AA have fallen apart is what I'm told several times and had to be reformed out of nothing. Again, I defer to the experts on those things because that's not my thing. And I'm glad it has survived. I'm glad the OTO has survived, and it is quite large. We'll never really. The funny thing about the GD is we never know how big it is because so many of the groups just stay quiet because why would they be public? It's publicity is not part of our work. It's not what we're about.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got friends in the AA, I've got friends in the OTO, and then obviously I've got my
Yeah.
very good friends in the GD, and I listen to everybody and take into consideration their realities and their perspectives and their experiences. And I guess it's just my interest. I can't say, I can't speak for anybody else. You know, maybe that's their path to do whatever. I respect them, and I have good relationships with people in those other areas. But what appeals to me most, at least, and what seems the most authentic and genuine, and what I can get the most from and learn and grow from the most, I feel like is, you know, HOGD.
Yeah. The nice thing about a lot of occult groups is if they're run well and they're training people well, then you should be able to find people who are competent enough to work the grimoires with you, to do real conjuration operations where, it's hard to do that with complete beginners and just jump them into grimoires, right? Because as soon as they hear about, fasting and purification, or, just the arduous little technicalities, people think that Golden Dawn or OTO or stuff like that is complicated compared to the grimoires. And in some ways, in certain areas, it is more detailed and nuanced. But the grimoires are plenty complicated on their own. There's like, have you read the preparations for the Sworn Book? Like the Liber Iuratus is like 65 days of preparation. The Abramelin is 18 months of preparation to work with that grimoire, right? And, in the Golden Dawn, it's like 7 years of preparation before we work with grimoires, maybe 5 or 3.5, or if you're me or Ike Baker.
Yeah, I've just like become to this point where I've learned how much I'm unaware of and how much I'm needing to learn. And it's just like, fuck, that's such a reality check. It's like, damn, I've got a ways to go. Like guys like you or Ike or whatever. And I'm just like,
well, the nice thing about I like Golden Dawn magicians because you can take them and say, look, we're gonna work with this grimoire or that grimoire, and when they hear about the preparations or the precision involved in consecrating certain things or gathering certain accoutrements, you're never going to hear a Golden Dawn magician say, "Oh, well, do we really have to do that? Is that really important?" No, you're not going to hear a Golden Dawn adept say that. They're going to be like, "Oh, is that all we have to do?" Right?
yeah.
It's like, "Oh, sure. I've had to go through way more than that." Yeah. Oh, what if the spirit doesn't show up visibly? How do we talk to it? Golden Dawn adept's not going to be like, I don't know what to do. If it's not here visibly, I can't work with it. No, right? We'll know exactly what to do. And so you have, again, with the grimoire purists who are saying that you should mainly just, the grimoires are the real thing and everything else is new age nonsense. Like John R. King III, God bless him. I love his work, but he does say that, and there's other people that say that as well. But yet, a lot of them, if you read other parts of their work, they emphasize at a certain point they'll say some passage. Ashen Chassan has. They all have this passage where it's like, now we know we've said that this is the main thing, and that you should stick to the grimoire, to the letter, and just do it to the word. But a little hypnosis doesn't hurt, or if you're not very sensitive to energies, you might try some of these practices or other exercises from other traditions, like the Golden Dawn, or like this or that, or psychism or channeling or spiritism or any of these things. So, yeah, I think the Golden Dawn does a great job at training people to work with the grimoires, which is one of the things that Mathers intended it to be. Otherwise, he wouldn't have created the order the same year he put out the Lesser Key of Solomon. Like, duh, right? But at the same time, the Golden Dawn also has this whole other element, which is the Hermetic side of it, where we have this theurgical practice of theosis, because Hermetism is not about henosis. It's not about reuniting with the one. That's not what Hermetism is about, and neither is the Golden Dawn. It's about theosis. So I think in more Gnosticism you have henosis, but in Hermetism you have theosis, where you divinize to becoming like a god, like the Elohim, as taking us back to Genesis. And I'm not convinced, actually. I don't think Wes Huff made a convincing argument. He made the argument for why Elohim in Genesis refers to a singular God, despite having a masculine plural and identifying with the masculine plural. He does make it that is the argument. He makes it very clearly. There's still plenty of evidence that, or there, there's still just as good an argument that the Genesis 1 text, which is from the priestly writers, so that's much later than the Yahwist writers, like Genesis 2, when God's walking around in the garden in Genesis 2 and 3, all anthropomorphized and like has a body, has a backside. That's an older text than
Hmm.
Genesis 1 that's written by the priestly writers, or peace source as we call it in biblical criticism. And so, in Genesis 2, they use the word Yahweh to refer to God, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Adonai, Tetragrammaton. But in Genesis 1, it's Elohim. So it's a later term that's used. And maybe the people who wrote it were referring to an idea similar to the Council of Gods, or just the gods in general. Doesn't really make sense if you look at the linguistics of the rest of those verses around it. It does sound like you're talking about a singular deity, right? In the beginning was God created the heavens and the earth, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't say in the beginning, it's not really saying that God's created the heaven and the earth
Well, it's like,
because of the nature of the language, right? Like it's saying who, right? Who
yeah.
is he in Hebrew?
I mean, you'd know more than
The
I would, but I think
Yeah.
I think
Well,
I resonate with what you're saying. But so like Wes, I've heard some criticisms, like some of the things that he said about the Book of Isaiah and whatnot, like being like word for word, and then there's like these a lot of people that have popped up being like, dude, the Book of Isaiah is not word for word. Um, and then they'll talk about like different textual variants, and then like a couple additional maybe like sentences or whatnot that have been included in different versions of the Book of Isaiah that have occurred later in time than they did in the historical past or whatnot. And so, like, I feel like these things are really cool and interesting to listen to. Um, but it's fun and it's good. And it's like, to me, I'm like, this is awesome because now this is going to instigate this like revolution of like introspection and people looking into and like dissecting and like actually trying to look at these things through the lens of truth and like putting them out there and competing against like what is the truth of these things. And I think it's going to bring about like this crazy revolution in like understanding and biblical literacy and historicity of all of these things that's gonna like just explode people's minds with like the reality, whether it's what they want to agree with or not. It's gonna be contended with, and there's gonna be people that are like scholars that are battling out these ideas. And so to me, it's very exciting and a little rant.
people becoming aware of biblical hermeneutics and just hermeneutic theory in general would be very useful. It's primarily used by two kinds of people, uh, theologians and priests, and lawyers. So the main application of hermeneutics, which is essentially understanding, is applied by clergy interpreting religious text or doctrine, and lawyers interpreting legal codes, because legal codes were written in a time and place for a certain reason. And so understanding that is crucial to knowing how to interpret them for us today so that they have value and truth. And when they don't any longer, that's usually when we retire that law. Unfortunately, we don't really retire scripture or doctrine in the same way, but sometimes we do, and that's when big things change and happen, right?
Yeah. One thing it was cool. I was listening to this dude talk about, there's like this debate between some of these Greek, uh, I don't even know what you would call them, but like there's a contention between some people of what came first, the Greek or the Hebrew. And then, they'll kind of battle this out between different texts, whether it's, I was trying to use the word Old Testament, the Hebrew
Hebrew
scriptures,
Bible.
yeah, and the New Testament
I mean,
stuff. But things like Psalms, and one of the really cool things that I was looking at where they were doing this comparative analysis between the Greek and the Hebrew within particular Psalms is that if you look at the Hebrew beginnings of each like the beginning of each sentences in these like poetic structures, it'd be like it would start with like aleph, 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 and they'd be like mem, mem, mem. Uh, like these different Hebrew letters would begin, and they would continue to begin each sentence of each of these lines or whatever within the Psalms. But when you get the Greek version, it doesn't have that coherence. Like because when you translate the Hebrew words to the Greek words, they don't start with with alpha, 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 omega, omega, or whatever.
Right.
Like
Right.
so, it
Well,
was
they're
like
numbered, right? They're numbered, and those numbers didn't translate to
yeah.
Greek for some reason, I suppose, when they wrote the Septuagint.
So it was like this really cool demonstration of, at least for Psalms. I'm not saying this for the rest of the scriptures
For
or
a few
whatever,
Psalms, yeah, they're very specific. The numbered Psalms
but it
are
was
very
like
specific, and
this
they
is
must have been the
pretty
numbers might
clearly
have been
Hebrew.
added later.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So it was like
the
a
numbers might have
cool.
been added later.
Yeah, it was a cool demonstration because you could really kind of like look at it and be like, yeah, I mean, you can't really argue with that. Like how miraculous would that be if you could you could just get each of these each of these poetic structures to begin with the same letter every time, yet you can't convert it to the Greek, and it doesn't have that same like sort of coherent structure. You know what I mean?
Yeah, when you yeah, like so it's not like it was written in Greek first and then they translate to Hebrew and coincidentally they started off with those letters. No, of course not. I can't believe anyone would ever believe that the Hebrew Bible was first written in Greek. Like that's just nonsensical.
There's some people that
It's
make that.
insane. It's
Yeah.
absurd. It's ridiculous. Like yeah, the
But like
ancient
people like
Hebrews
me, I don't
did
know
not
any
write their
better.
sacred texts in
Yeah.
Greek. Yeah. Um the Hebrews even included the Jew, like it was Christians who numerated the scriptures, right? We're the Christians came in and added the chapters and verse. Those things didn't exist before Christians added them, and then Jews adopted those. They just were like, okay, well, we're not going to do our own versions. We'll just take these as they are, and that way we can actually. Because otherwise, how can you go debate people when you've numbered Isaiah differently to the Christians that you're debating publicly? You got to be able to refer to the same spot. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually thought it was. Yeah. Anyway, doesn't matter. Well, go ahead. What's your question?
Oh,
Travels.
I was just curious. I was going to ask you about your travels to Prague. It's always been like extremely attractive to me, but as far as, your travels are concerned and geography and what you've experienced, I was curious some of the places that you've been that have had like a really strong impact, and I heard you kind of describe this like uh being like, Dean Kelly's tower type thing, like interacting with the angels. And I was like, this is super cool. And so I want to ask you about that. Like, what was your experience with all that?
Yeah, the recent time I was there in 2019 and doing some lectures there at Kelly's Tower in the Malastrana district above the Calixir Cafe, which is a beautiful little restaurant with amazing cocktails that have smoke pouring out of them. And there's a big alchemist basement downstairs with huge actual dungeon rooms, each of them large enough to fit an entire GD temple in them. So you could actually rent them out and have like 2, 3 ceremonies going on at once. It's amazing space. And the people there are all great, but they had the trap door to the top of the tower with the little heart-shaped windows exposing the top of the turret to the air. And so I went up there and did the call of the portal and I was interrupted. I stumbled on my words and interrupted by this like pressure on banging knock on my head. And it was just like, stop it. We're here. What's going on? And that was a profound experience because it was like just another reminder that you don't always need to go through the whole song and dance, especially if the spirits are there and ready and willing to talk to you. And so I talked to a couple spirits that then guided me through the next few weeks as I went back to Leipzig to finish some work I was doing in Leipzig. Said farewell to some friends there and went back to Prague to finish my work on the continent before presenting to Dr. Voss's PhD and master's students at the University of Kent in Canterbury. So that was the journey there. And it made me realize, yeah, we need to do something here. We need to have an international event here. And so we'll do that in 2027 and hopefully come then and participate in the fourth annual Enokia Con. And since it's in Europe, I'll be able to invite all the scholars and experts who are over there in Europe, like Stephen Skinner and György Zsünyi and the other academics on the continent who obviously I could never afford to fly to Vancouver. So we'll do the European thing hopefully in 2027 once we've tested and tried and played with ideas of how these things work here in North America.
Fuck yeah. One of the things that was awesome that I was listening is like you were there and you were like noticing that the access to the top of the roof or something was like open and you're like, can I go up there? And the dude's like, well,
yeah. She said, yeah, the tour girl said, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, it's
like it's just like kind of like a fate type thing. Where
yeah, she said usually it's locked, but if it's not locked, go ahead. And
like,
so
she's like,
and no one else in the little tour group wanted to go, so I went up there and did my thing. And it was a profound but brief experience. But the spirits who were there, I kept communicating with, and yeah, it was that led me to create the Enochian purist Enochian course. That's when I started. It was them that gave me the understanding that I need to look at Enochian in a different way.
Yeah.
And so that's when I got into deep purism and traditional Enochian and spent every day since then trying to get other people into it as well. And that's how I came across Dr. Burns and all these other great people, the recently deceased Dr. Jones, God rest him, and his amazing work in the Enochian world that he did, David R. Jones. And I reviewed his book list and did a video on my YouTube about the best Enochian books based on his list. I just made a video basically of his list and then added my own 2 cents, of course. And he's passed on to the great beyond. And there's some really amazing stuff in the traditional purist approach to Enochian magic. And of course, I made a massive discovery that the academics in the field even acknowledged was a massive discovery, and I'm publishing it academically as I'm working on the academic article right now, so I won't say too much about it, but I've got,
okay. That was going to be my next question.
I've got the help of certain notable people in the academic occult world, and so hopefully I'll have my first academic peer-reviewed paper published soon. I mean, I've reviewed other papers from those journals and torn them apart because they were nonsense and been proven right. And so, like, I don't actually think that academic publishing is the be-all and end-all of stuff. We see famously, the academic paper published on the LBRP that ignored flat out all the manuscript on the LBRP and just went with their own pseudo-thelemic modern magic interpretation of it, and it's just pure eisegesis, and I can't believe it got peer reviewed. How did it get peer reviewed? It's flabbergasting. But then again, it seems these days all you have to do is plagiarize a doctorate, submit it to Harvard, and you'll get paid $1 million a year to run the place. So the academy's in big trouble because it's hard to respect it these days. But we have to keep in mind that every scholar is different, and a lot of them are great and amazing things happen at universities. There's also just a massive amount of corruption from the crazy amount of fake PhDs we have running around and running the countries and different major government offices and stuff, all on these fraudulent plagiarized degrees. And they're not getting fired. They're not getting expelled. They're getting rewarded by being millionaires, even once they've been outed. So that's nonsense and that's evil. That's just so corrupt. It's disgusting. But then we have the good ones. I mean, yes. Dr. Sledge has lambasted the publishing aspect of academic publishing. Thank God. He's got we've empowered him by making him independently secure enough that he can actually say what he thinks now, and that's good. But you saw his own mentor just got fired from his university for speaking his mind, and that's really, really shitty. That university, that school should be absolutely ashamed of itself, but so should a lot of schools these days.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I listened to, I think it was like you and Ike's podcast, where you were kind of like teasing at this interesting discovery that you had with Dee, and something
You can go
along.
listen to the lecture. People can still enroll
Okay.
in last year's conference.
Okay.
It's
Wasn't sure
available.
if that was anything you were able
It's still
to.
available.
Okay.
We have people still enroll all the time, and yes, it costs a few shekels, but you're supporting in-person events in a time and in a world moving into a future where they want us to not be in community and in actual contact with other living human beings. And who they are, I don't know, but something wants us to isolate and die and vanish as a species. There's a massive death drive going on in the world these days, and I don't really understand it, but I certainly know I'm going to fight against it. And the way I know the best way to do that is to bring people together in person, and that's where
Definitely.
people connect. We've lost third spaces. We've lost places for people to connect. And as someone who's never had a hard time making friends and being part of active social circles and being the hub of my own social world, like again, I'm worried about other people. I'm worried about the shocking amount of my friends who self-deleted during COVID, and largely because they were fired from their jobs, thrown out of their homes, and denied any services. So, what else
Yeah.
choice did they have except to let the government kill them, you know?
Yeah.
And that needs to stop. And it's because I'm sure loneliness was a factor. I'm sure isolation was a factor. But I
Yeah.
know these people, and they were happier, wealthier, healthier than I will ever be in my life, and they couldn't handle it. So
Yeah.
what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you, man. Fuck
So
that
we're
shit.
bringing people together. Let's do things. I
Let's
know
do.
it's expensive to do things in person and to support groups that are doing that, but
You're like the one doing the EnokiaCon, right?
yeah, it's all me.
Yeah. Fucking
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, and do you want to scoop?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, your people are hearing it here first. The first featured presenter for this year's EnokiaCon, which will be here in Vancouver, as well as online, but
Mhm.
here in Vancouver, um, will be none other than Father Aaron Leach.
You absolutely fucking amazing. I love
So
that dude.
invites have gone out to others. We'll see what they say. But Aaron Leach and Dr. Terry Burns, I believe they're already in talks about potential topics to debate or roundtable together in person. And I'm going to extend an invitation. Hopefully, we'll do a little, well, I'll save more information. But that's the scoop. There you go.
That's
Aaron Leach
good.
is confirmed as
I'm
the
so glad.
one of our our featured presenters for EnokiaCon, because it's mostly the conference is about bringing people in the Pacific Northwest and giving them an opportunity to, drive to Vancouver. It's just a few, everything's so close together in the Pacific Northwest. We're 2 hours from Seattle.
Yeah.
It's faster for me to drive to Opus's house than it is for me to, you know, do a lot of other things. Go to Whistler, for example. I mean, it's a sort of similar, but yeah, we've got a nice part of neck of the woods on the continent here, and so we want to encourage people who live here to do presentations and be a part of it. And of course, for big names, we need to fly those people in to create a draw and create some excitement, and to use the funds from people's membership fees to facilitate this stuff. This is not a for-profit endeavor. This is, it's run as a business because I don't trust nonprofits anymore. Oh, that's how you get snakes
There's a
in,
lot of
like
profit in
bringing their
nonprofits. That's for
bringing
sure.
their friends. Oh, it's so sketchy how nonprofits function. Like that's how the Golden Dawn Order I ran at the end was, and it was taken away from me by people just forging my signature on bank accounts and on corporation documents. They just were able to forge it, and the government's like, "Yeah, we don't care, whatever," you know. And it's like, okay, I'm never doing that again. So you can just like people can just forge your signature, and the
Ugh.
bank doesn't care, and they're like, "Yeah, well, it's too late now. Haha, gotcha." It's like that's not how the law should work, but it's a corrupt world. So yeah, I'm running it as a business, but the goal of the business is to my success will be determined by how much money I make for the presenters and how cool the events are. So if we
Yeah,
get enough people, if we get like 80, 90 people or 100 people to show up, the extra money will go to
it
paying for
will.
a massive banquet. We'll just
Yeah,
put that money into a banquet. I'm not going to pocket 10, 20 grand. Fuck no.
you're
I'm going to
going
put it into a
to.
banquet. I'm going to pour the money back into the events. Yeah, I
Absolutely.
am underwriting this myself this year, and hopefully I won't have to next year. But I'm willing to risk my guitar collection to make sure that this event happens.
Fuck yes. And hopefully there's no
Fuck
fucking
yes.
crazy bullshit shenanigans with some fucking COVID shit or whatever to where it gets in the way because I
I
love,
don't think there'll be more COVID.
yeah, I hope not. COVID fucking 2.5.3.6 point A, B, C, D or whatever. But anyway, there's a couple questions I want to ask you. If you could speak to your personal transformation going through the order of the GD and any advice for initiates that are currently going through the order. Anything along those lines. Curious to ask for you.
It's very broad and open-ended, so I could basically say whatever I want, which is kind of awesome.
Yes.
If you have any specific
That's my
questions,
intention.
those are good too.
Say whatever you want. That's my hope.
I mean, I think it's important to remember that I hear from a lot of people who contact me for one-off sessions for spiritual direction, or even who become full-time students, that again, they struggle with doing things to the point of success, right? A lot of people give up too soon, right? Or they give up when things stop being exciting and interesting. And I always like to say, I was sort of taught the idea that, I wasn't taught this explicitly, but the idea that you don't really start to do a thing, not even just until you know it by heart, but until you're you're bored of it. Once you're bored with the practice, that's when you start to unlock what it can actually do for you, in my experience. That's when you really start to, because then there's no ego involved anymore. Then you've moved beyond that point. Your attention is directed towards something higher, like somehow you're actually serving God by doing this meditation or ritual, even though you know it back to front, you've done it a million times, you're tired of it, but you're doing it anyway. That's where I think some of the true theosis occurs and the true inner transformation occurs, whether it's because you're modeling the nature of the self-sacrificing, self-generating universe by that very impetus and gesture within yourself, or whether it's because that's actually how power develops. I don't know. I don't think any of us will ever really understand the metaphysics of it. I mean, sometimes we get glimpses of how it might actually work on psychedelics or on seriously deep and mental and emotional states of altered knowing. And we get these glimpses of like, oh, that's how it works. But once you're out of that state, it doesn't make sense anymore. You're like, wait, I had it. What was it? It was like what we think, but it was different. And it's gone. You just can't, you know, you're in that state. So you see the world from a different perspective. But then we get back to our regular humdrum lives and we're like, I'll have to try that again and rinse and repeat.
Talk to me about theurgy versus thaumaturgy. What's your perspective on that?
I mean, thaumaturgy as a word is kind of a neologism in the sense, right? Like when John Dee used it, he used it to describe a mechanical stage prop that he, created in a play he did at Cambridge so that it looked like there was a bird that was flying. Like that was one of the original uses of the word thaumaturgy, a wonder working. But magically, it's sort of useful to think of it as defining magic that is aimed at manifestations or phenomena in the world, or wonders. Wonder working is really the definition. So working wonders in the world, as opposed to theurgy, which is God work. But I think the two are intimately related. And as time goes on, actually, I become less and less convinced that using those words as distinct terms is very helpful. Because a lot can be achieved in your life through becoming closer to God. A lot of wonders in your life can be achieved that way. And you might even say that thaumaturgy functions via theurgy, you could say. So again, I'm not a big fan of those terms so much anymore.
Okay.
I mean, they serve their role. They serve their role.
Okay, I'll ask you one more time, and if you want to dodge this question, that's cool. But any interesting discoveries with John Dee that you have come across? If you want to share them, if not, that's cool. But I remember you teasing one on Ike's podcast that I think you were particularly interested in.
So
Really,
I presented it. I presented it in full
Nokia.
at a Nokia Con,
Right.
and you can watch the full lecture.
Okay.
And you know, by signing up to those lectures, it's now a cyber course conference, and there's a payment plan for those who want, and the money goes, you know, to the presenters and helps fund their travels to future Enokia cons or other conferences or research. We all know how expensive a lot of the books we need are. Like the amount of I've bought more than a few books this in the last year that cost over $400 or $500 each. Because it was literally the only way to get that information. Well, I needed the Christian Bull Hermetic Tradition book. It's the like only real academic work on Hermes Trismegistus, basically.
Wait,
and if you don't have it, the Christian Bull, is it called the? Here, let me grab it.
Ooh, interesting. I don't know if I know about this. I'm super interested. But I do know we have a lot of the same books in our book collection because I've seen.
Well, you know, after 30 years, I got tired of just repeating the things I knew about Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus from books published in the 90s. And I eventually decided, like, now, this time, as I'm training initiates in the Golden Dawn tradition, as well as initiates in Hecatian traditions, the pagan traditions, and even, I even have a rabbi as a student. But I wanted to actually tell them stuff that I know is true. Based on actual literature and textual scholarship. So here's the book. It's very very famous at this point. The only problem is it's done by Brill, so you know it's
that's expensive as fuck.
Yeah, this costs like $550.
Fuck, it's probably amazing.
But you know it's life changing because now I actually have a resource to actually. You know, Hermes wasn't Thoth the Atlantean, let's say.
He wasn't? Are you kidding me?
I mean, once in a while, I think he might be, but then I come down and realize, wait. The pyramids probably were made by us.
Okay.
We're pretty amazing.
We are pretty amazing. I agree with you on that. I want to ask you,
we deserve some credit.
We do. I think that I don't know. When it comes to the Egyptian thing and like how they created those structures, there's a lot of questions, a lot of possibilities. What humans are capable of, though, is probably a lot more than we can imagine. I don't know the answers, but I feel like obviously we're capable of great things. But regardless, I want to ask you, how important are pronunciations when it comes to divine names?
I think you just should do the best you can, but like with a lot of them, we're never going to know what the vowels were pronounced, right? Even in Hebrew, we didn't have the vowels, for a long time, and so we don't know what vowels were used, and that's certainly the case with Egyptian. We have we know what the consonants are, but we're sort of guessing when it comes to vowels. So it makes us, again, that's why I say to people not to get hung up on it, right? And that's, I think, very important. Then there's dialects, That's another factor, right? Is it Kether or Kesser?
Well, I remember I listened to you doing a podcast where you were talking about that. That's what you're saying. The Hasidic individual that you were learning from, he was like Keter, and you were like,
Keter. Yeah. So and he was, but Ashkenazi would say Kesser, right? An S instead of a T sound for Tav, which is strange, but sure, why not? There's a lot of examples like that when it comes to those sort of divine names, I think.
What are your
don't get too hung up on it.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on things like what it means to be a Semite? Because I don't give a fuck. I have 10% Ashkenazi genetics. I've heard people say that like Ashkenazi is like not really Semitic and like what determines Semitism and all this thing. And I know this is like a super controversial subject.
It really shouldn't be controversial because we
I
actually
don't
have
give a shit.
historical
But yeah.
answers to this. So like the idea of anti-Semitism is barely 100 years old, right?
Yeah.
There was no definition of Jewish people as Semites until the 19th century.
Mhm.
And so, you know, when people talk about anti-Semitism historically, they actually should be talking about anti-Judaism, anti-Jewishness. Like, yeah, like in the Gospel of John, the Christians in the Johannine community weren't anti-Semitic, they were anti-Jewish. And this whole idea of races in the way we have it today developed in the 19th century, and it led to like Blavatsky and the idea of these root races, which is why you have all this, you know, horrific stuff from Alice Bailey and her writing about the Jewish problem. It's just disgusting. And you know, these ideas were en vogue, and the consequences of them weren't fully considered until the Holocaust was over, and then we're like, oh, it could go this place, it could go to this place, and that sucks.
Yeah.
Let's not do this ever again. And maybe we shouldn't think of people in terms of race. And that's, you know, then we have the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King saying we should be judged by the content of our character, not by the color of their skin. And obviously that idea took hold and defined us ever after. And racism died. We just have never judged each other by the color of our skin ever since.
No, nobody has. That's preposterous. I mean, come on.
No. It's
okay. You had this post. It said, "There's no LHP. Changed my mind." What is that? Is this something I should know? What's the LHP?
Well, there's no left-hand path in Western
left-hand
esotericism.
That's what that refers
Not
to.
really. I mean, there is now. Dr. Puka
is this like a different
just got a
thing
book
of, like,
deal.
LRP?
Writing about the LHP and has a course on the LHP, and that's what people should take if they want to understand the left-hand path. But the screwed up thing about it is a lot of people who want to get into this edgy stuff, they're like, oh, if I'm into shadow work, then that's LHP. And then they tell that everyone who's not doing what they're doing, that you're right-hand path. Like Christians are right-hand path, occultists are left-hand path. That's so brain dead. It's absolutely mind-boggling. Like, this is such nonsense. So first of all, you don't get to decide what defines other people in contradistinction to yourself. You can't be like, I decide that I'm like this and I'm going to redefine it, and that means I can put everyone else into a basket and tell them who they are. Like it's completely anti-intellectual and truly, like, that's actual bigotry in the most stupid sense. It's crazy how many people tell me that if I'm interested in actually understanding the depths of my soul, that I can only do that on the left-hand path. It's like, fuck you. No way. Like, I don't do magic like John Michael Greer with either of my hands tied behind my back. Though, now that I've quoted John Michael Greer, Marco Visconti will probably call for my death again, so...
This fucking guy, Marco Visconti or whatever, fucking fuck that guy.
I mean, he's a lefty who believes that he has the right to call for violence against whomever he wants, and he's safe to do so, and he is. You know, he's got that power as someone who's willing to sacrifice their own integrity and their own reason to cause as much pain and suffering on others as they can. And him accusing, you know, well, he got some guy's life ruined. He got that guy's life ruined because he's like, no, this woman accused him of rape, and so I know for sure it definitely happened. And now he's had to recant, and he recanted in a very meek way after like destroying Rufus Opus to his whatever extent he could, and calling all these people like rape apologists. And he told me they're all rape apologists, and kept telling me who I should and shouldn't talk to based on this thing that then the woman recanted. And I don't know why she hasn't been fired from the university she works at. She should be in jail for the rest of her life for falsely accusing him of that. That's absolutely insane. These people are disgusting. And they're righteous, self-righteous to boot. So, you know, you can't be self-righteous and disgusting and be a bigot. It's just too disgusting to look at. So I'm thoroughly disgusted by all of them and this war that they've created within the occult community, based on the most facile political views you could possibly imagine. It's so anti-human. It's complete misanthropy.
It's fucking
Sorry,
pathetic,
you got
dude.
me going. You got me cooking.
Keep going, dude. I'm with you. Fuck that shit. Um, there was something that you were talking about. I don't know. This is like some old history stuff or whatever, but like you were talking about people doing like political magic in the Bush era and like I don't know
Yeah,
a bunch about that, but like what was up with all that stuff? Like what was going on?
I think that stuff always goes on. In
Like are you
in
like were
my
they like
time.
in favor of like Bush? Like were they like
Yeah, we
supporting
had
like
we had we had we had Zink who was into that,
what?
and
That's
so that
fucking
caused a
crazy.
political split with Canada, who was very anti-Bush. I mean, when your country's in trouble when its three leaders are named Bush, Dick, and Colin.
Bush took it
Yeah,
going.
I know. Most people haven't heard that, which shocks me, but
Oh my God.
apparently that one slipped by most people. And that was most people weren't interested in politics. Most magicians I've known in my life are not interested in politics. And
Yeah.
I was never interested in politics. I became interested when all of a sudden the governments told me I was not allowed to work
Yeah, there's
or
like that.
live in a home or eat food
Oh,
and go
it's like
outside without, like, that's when started paying attention. All of a sudden starving in my room and told it was illegal to try and feed myself.
yeah, I think there's the thing is like if you're not interested in politics, politics becomes interested in you or something like that. I don't remember what the thing is, but it's fucking pretty true. But yeah, it'll come fucking knocking at your door and then you're like, "Oh shit." Um, that's crazy though. And I don't know what to make of it, but it sounds interesting. I don't know how anybody could be like justifying being in favor of policies of Bush or any of that nonsense or like what was all going on there, but it sounds pretty bonkers to me.
I mean, up here we were like, did he just bomb the shit out of Iraq to get their oil? Like, we all have this understanding. It's like, oh, the bad guys are in Afghanistan. We'll bomb Iraq. And it's like, wait, what's happening? And, we just sit there in the cafe looking at these explosions happening in Iraq and being like, oh, and it's the reporter being like, and fortunately they were given no notice, so they didn't have time to escape. It's like, what is going on? Yeah, the warmongering is on all sides of the political spectrum, from what I can tell. And that's the most evil thing humans do is make war on each other. I mean, yeah, the tattoo on my arm was my present to myself from seminary, where I took the advice of an Anglican priest who taught me and said, just take your favorite verse from the Bible and take it all the way.
Nice.
And
What
this
was
one
yours?
is be still and know that I am God. But in researching that, I discovered it had a meaning that it was lost due to cutting off a few words from
Mm.
the Hebrew version. So before the Hebrew version, there was an older version to the Masoretic text that was, captured in the Aramaic Talmuds. I believe it was the Talmuds I found it.
Like
It
the
might have been in the
Babylonian
Mish.
Talmud?
N
Or is this different?
no, no,
Okay.
the Jewish, Talmuds. I
Okay.
think I found it in the Talmuds, but I might have found it in Rashi, in the Mishnah. I can't recall, but I found the verse referenced in, because you learn how to cross-reference all these sources. So if you find a verse in the Psalms, for example, you can go look in a lexicon and see every place in the Mishnah and in the Talmuds and all those texts where that verse is mentioned. And I think it was Rashi who mentioned the verse, or someone, and it didn't say be still and know that I am God. It was a quote in Aramaic. And so, I had done I had been lucky enough to get a year of Aramaic in grad school. And I looked at the first few words, pasaka mean karavah. And then after that, it says, and know that I am God. But it doesn't say, be still and know that I am God. It says, stop fighting wars and know that I am God.
Whoa.
That is a very different
Wow.
meaning than be still and know that I'm God, which people use as this sort of spiritual bypassing, transcendentalizing. Oh, just don't worry about the world. Just rise up and ascend, and everything will be fine if you know God and just ignore the chaos of the world. This verse is not that. This verse originally said, no, stop fighting wars
Damn.
and know that I am God.
Fuck
And
yeah.
that's why I love the, because this verse also represents, and I have it in all four languages, it also represents the loss of inherent meaning and the loss of the most important meaning through interpretation. So I'm mainly a hermeneut, but
Damn.
as a hermeneut, my fascination isn't just with the multiplicity of interpretations and how meanings beget meanings in this infinite semiosis of of understanding, but you do need to go back to the facts often and to as best you can what the original text meant to the original people. And in this case, it wasn't just chill out, man, and it'll be okay. The original meaning was don't kill people, stop the war, stop it now, or
Dude,
you're screwed.
respect. I love that.
Yeah, I only have 2 tattoos. They need to have pretty serious meaning for me to bother.
What's your other one?
Oh, just the 561.
561.
I don't know. We'll talk about it another time.
Okay. Okay, talk to me about Falcon and Steiner and his connection with the Golden Dawn.
It seems that Robert Falcon didn't really find much favor with Steiner, but kind of held him on a pedestal. And again, Nick Farrell's done more research into this than I have. I'm sort of just leaning on his work here. But definitely Falcon grabbed some things straight from Steiner. Probably the ritual of the link, and definitely the daily rhythms. And we know that he grabbed the idea for the daily rhythms that we find in the Stella Matutina from Steiner, because that's Steiner's term, is daily rhythms. That's what we have in Waldorf school from kindergarten to grade 12, is we have these daily rhythms that we say, the verses that are memorized and repeated. And then in the later grades, sometimes you do poems from famous authors or such and such. But this idea of verses carrying you throughout the day and signifying and denotating marked events. So Steiner wrote a calendar of the soul, and every day or every few days there's a new verse that you read, and anthroposophists like that. And so, Falcon incorporated it into his Golden Dawn Stella Matutina order offshoot. And I think that's great. Me and everyone I know sort of really enjoys those as being part of our lives. So, yeah. But I think he didn't really get in with Steiner in the way he wished he could have. I think I don't know why. I don't know why. I'm not the expert on that, and I don't know if anyone is.
Yeah. What, in your estimation, constitutes an initiation?
Well, depends what kind of, yeah. I mean, an initiation is the beginning of a thing, right? Like as soon as you start studying, say, any grimoire, you've begun that initiation. Whether you finish it or not is up to you and maybe the spirits of that system or text. But yeah, it's something that should not be overblown, but at the same time, it shouldn't be underblown. It should be blown just right. And serious initiation ceremonies shouldn't be reduced to just being empty ritual, right? That's what we sort of see happen a lot of the time, is the understanding of the meaning behind these ceremonies gets taken out, or people think that one ceremony is equivalent to another ceremony. So just because just because you're like, I have people tell me that being like a adept in the Golden Dawn is the same thing as having a PhD. It's like, a PhD in what? In what are you talking about?
Yeah. Economics. You have a PhD in economics.
I'm not an astronomer because I chant in Hebrew.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's that's a loose equivocation, to put it nicely.
I think that in terms of the information consolidation and seriousness of memorization and information, it could be related to acquiring a PhD. Like the amount of things that you have to remember and hold within your consciousness about any particular subject. Maybe you could say like that's equivalent to getting your what is like SAM or something in within the GD. I wouldn't know, but
I think the big misunderstanding people have about university education is that it's about knowledge. It's about gaining knowledge, and it is, but it's not about gaining facts the way and just accumulating facts. So people who think that you don't need university education because you can now look up anything with AI, that is missing the point entirely. No, it's about changing how you think.
yeah.
And then as soon as you say that these days, you get people saying, "Oh, well, they're just going to indoctrinate you with pseudo-Marxism or
Yeah.
some other surreptitious evil idea and doctrine." That's not true either, right? You will
Yeah.
learn critical thinking on a level that you haven't learned it. You'll learn how to work and think through sources in a way you haven't done before. And there's stages to that game. There's the undergraduate stage, the graduate stage, the doctoral stage, and you're learning a different way of thinking, and it's painful oftentimes. And that's what people don't understand. It's not so much about memorizing facts and data. It's about changing how you think fundamentally. And so until you've done it, you don't know if you've done it. You probably haven't done it. If you
Yeah.
think you have, you probably haven't. And I notice that every time I continue to progress further in my own academic thinking about these things. And the best thing about it is the moments where you're wrong, right? Like I was talking to Dr. David Litwa the other day, who's the amazing scholar who brought us the Hermetica 2, and now he's gone and brought us the
Oh,
Hermetica
nice.
1, which is basically, this is what the Kabbalion wishes it was. This is the
Oh,
Hermetic
shit.
Bible. It's finally been published with big print and a gutter large enough to rebind it into your own little ritual version. You could rebind that easily with a big gutter. And he's retranslated it all from Greek and Coptic because, of course, he has. And he's put it together in the order of initiation, even grabbing the necessary fragments from the Nag Hammadi library
And
and
this
the Stobaean
text
Hermetica.
one that you would recommend?
This is the most important book for anyone interested in Hermetica to get,
Hermetica
period.
1 by David Litwa.
Yeah, he's been on Dr. Sledge's Esoteric channel. He's all over the place. He's got a Gnostic Academy that he's
'Cause
running
I've got,
online
like-
because universities don't want to let someone like him actually teach, right? So of course he has to become a
Yeah.
YouTuber. That's the new era that we're in.
Yeah, because I've got like the Hermetica in a couple different versions. I got like the Poimanders and its individual copy by some particular translator or whatever. But the Hermetica 1, and I've heard of the Hermetica 2. I don't have it.
Yeah, you've got the Copenhagen.
I don't have the Copenhagen
Yeah.
actually.
Oh,
I have,
okay.
I
No.
have fuck. I don't even know what
They're
it
all
is.
fun.
I'm working on
They all have their.
I'm putting like a new leather bound on it because it's like a paperback and I want to make it like really nice, but it's not the Copenhagen.
The Walter Scott.
I think so. Yeah, it's got
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
tan cover on it. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a few versions. So yeah, the big study will come out from what's his name? I always forget his name. Christian something. That'll
But-
come out and that'll change things. But Litwa's following the same methodology, just has his own opinions about things, and he's an amazing scholar and done
So-
a lot of high level work with early Christianity as well as the Hermetica texts.
Is Litwa's Hermetica 1 is it drastically different than the other translations of the Hermetica, or what's up with
Yeah,
that?
it's not even, the texts aren't even in the normal order.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like they're completely reorganized, and all the astrological magic's basically stripped out because that was added later on.
But as far as you're concerned, this is like the
spiritual
way that
teachings.
it should be.
This is the best we'll get, I think, at present time, unless we discover some new manuscripts.
Okay.
Yeah, it's taking those texts and ordering them in the in a pathway for initiation, for usage, and
And
that's what
Hermetica
we needed.
Hermetica 2 is that
That's a straight up academic translation of the Stobaean fragments and some other stuff that had just never been translated into English before. He was the first one to do that. And now he's gone through, and this is a different text to that. This is not an academic text. This is a popular rendition for people actually following that form of spirituality.
How do you feel about the Hermetica 2? What as
It's
far as
great. It's I mean, there's lots of the Hermetica 2 in Hermetica 1 in a sense,
oh,
because
so
some of the
confusing.
texts flesh out the ideas. Well, there's the Hermetica 2 is just the technical Hermetica. So it's writings that were considered
Okay.
apart from the Corpus Hermeticum, but never should have been considered apart from the Corpus Hermeticum,
Mm.
because they're still part of the Hermetic community's texts that we have, and they elucidate a lot of the things that we need to know to understand that community, especially without the later interpolations of astrological magic that were added in probably by astrological magicians who were hermetists working with the text, and like, oh, could be added here and this could be added there, and then there's so many textual issues. It's a lot of fun. He's got a whole course on it, which is like only like $50. It's extremely underpriced.
Yeah.
Don't let him. I
Well
hope he
worth it.
doesn't hear me say that. Get it now, folks, before it becomes, you know, charged what it's actually worth.
Okay. So on that note, I want to ask you, because I've seen a lot of the books that you publish. Like I've got a lot of the same books that you've got. I know that you are somebody that studies across multiple traditions and subjects and all of this sort of thing. What are some of the texts that are currently available to people that you would recommend for people that are interested in understanding just the nature of, I don't know, reality and like good source information that's going to lend to somebody's understanding of consciousness and their individual relationship with the greater forms of consciousness at large? Like, what would you recommend for people, like, as far as texts and books are concerned, to get people into contact with like solid information that's like
It really does depend what the person wants.
something that is in favor of expanding your consciousness on a level that is harmonious with what is beneficial for yourself, your community, consciousness in general, like the zeitgeist, the uh I don't know. Is that making any sense? Like, am I making any sense?
I mean, I love where you're going. It's just, you haven't narrowed the parameters very much. So you're
I'm
asking for almost
trying.
anything.
I'm
I mean,
trying.
I get it. I feel you. I feel you. Well, okay. Um, it's not a book. The thing I think everyone should be looking at right now is the telepathy tapes.
Oh, okay. I've just recently heard about those. Yeah,
Yeah. Like, what the fuck?
that shit's
Pardon my
crazy.
French. But
Yeah.
either the materialist model is dead on arrival, game over,
Mhm.
done, and every atheist materialist who's going to cling to the idea that consciousness originates in the brain has become equivalent to what was used to be considered a religious zealot, you know, will die for their misbelief in things that are disproven factually. That's not what a religious zealot usually is, of course, but it's late. I've been up since, well, I slept until 6 a.m. today, so I'm feeling actually pretty good.
Fucking
Um,
6 a.m., dude. I woke up at
oh
like
yeah.
11 something this morning.
I've been up since 4 a.m. every night for the last several weeks. I mean, depending on whether I go through cycles.
Respect.
Yeah, it is what it is. Yeah, but my life is now an early morning life.
Yeah, that's
So
good.
yeah, these autistic kids are, it's 100%. It's 100%. And I know that it's real because, like, I've been practicing blindfolded seeing for a long time and gotten, I can prove it. Like, I've done it with people. Doesn't matter how much you blindfold me, I can tell you how many fingers you're holding up. Why? Because I see the light around your fingers shining through into my eye,
Yeah.
So can I get am I at the point where I can read what's written on a piece of paper? No, but I do believe I will get there.
Yeah.
So, but we have these autistic kids who are reading anything from anywhere, completely accurate, apparently. I don't know. Like, either
Yeah.
it's the biggest scam since of all time, done by hundreds of families around the world, and this MIT or John Hopkins scientist who's leading the experiments. Like, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I want to know what people think. I've asked I've asked people. Dr. Litwitz told me he'd look into it for me. I was like, good, please tell me if I'm nuts. Are we crazy? Because, he's a atheist materialist, I'm pretty sure. I know he's not religious.
Yeah.
He did his Masters of Divinity as well. And I asked him if he was
He's an
ever
atheist
considering.
material that did his master's in divinity.
Sure. I asked him if he wanted to be a priest or a clergyman or working in a church. And he wanted to be like a secular clergy or reverend. I don't want to speak for him, of course. So, and I don't know how much I should say, but like tons of clergy don't believe in God. Like probably half my seminary class.
It's hard to wrap your mind
believe that
around
God
for
was real.
people that
Like it's
like
like
on the
God's an
outside.
idea. A lot of people are like, God's a nice idea, but it's not like a thing, not like a real thing. That's very common in mainstream Christianity.
But it's also like if you're a materialist, it's like you still have to have that like one miracle of like the Big Bang or something. Like, so it's still
maybe.
I don't know. It's
I've heard that argument, and it's fine, but we don't even need to worry about that anymore if the telepathy tapes are real.
Right. Exactly. Which is fucking crazy.
And they said things that I knew from my experience to be true. For example, like the needing to be honest. Like if you're lying, if you're a dishonest person, you're not going to be able to do this stuff. That's my experience as well.
Yeah.
Honesty and congruency with your soul or nous are essential. Also, they talk about what's the other thing they talk about? So that tracked for me. Damn, I forgot what's the other thing. But it's absolutely wild. I'm so excited to see because it looks like people are actually at a point where they're ready to consider these things, especially if it's like, I mean, it's hard to argue with 100%, right?
Yeah, for sure. You can't.
The guy who, we've always been able to get up to 80% with training. It's always been doable. Like 30% more considered a high performance. That 30 to 50 is considered high probability performance for these things. And 80 is doable, and a lot of people have demonstrated 80% in a lot of things. But when you're talking about 100, and this is not just basic psychic skills. This is something else. This is something vastly superior that we're witnessing these kids doing. Again, unless it's all a scam, and please, if it's debunkable, go debunk it. Like we have to debunk it. That's the most urgent thing we need to do is debunk it, because if we can't debunk it, the old paradigm is officially dead.
For sure. Okay, so have you seen this new thing about taking DMT and projecting a laser at a surface and being able to look and like see some kind of code behind the laser, like some symbols or something? Have you seen this?
I find that absolutely ridiculous, because when you take DMT and actually open your eyes, you see code in everything.
Okay.
Or I do. It's all matrix code. Sometimes it's blue or dark green, and sometimes it's orange. I'm not sure. It probably depends where my consciousness is. I don't know how it works, whether we've gone somewhere or somewhere's gone to us, or we've entered a state in which these things don't exist. I don't understand it. But unless there's something else, like my question would be, why aren't you also seeing the code up and down the wall and running through everything? I've never heard of anyone taking DMT and only seeing code in this one little thing, and that one little thing happens to be a laser. I see stuff everywhere, and it does look like a code. It also looks a lot like a Nokian.
That's what I was going to ask you.
It's the same thing I see when I take
any,
high
like,
amounts
patterns
of... Same thing. It looks the same thing to me as with high amounts of psilocybin. It looks like little weird Enochian type letters that I see, and it's not Enochian, but it's similar, and the sounds I hear are similar in language. Same as with the language sound I hear when I'm going into a DMT. There's this talking. There's this weird talking, and I don't know what it is, but
yeah. Have you ever heard there's a couple dudes, and one of them was Daniel Winter. He's pretty far out, dude. He's like this like physicist guy.
Yeah, he's good friends with Dr. Burns, one of my
they
presenters.
did these like there's this thing with the toroid and Enochian, and how like Enochian fits into the symbolic
the letters are cones. So they look at
Right.
the letters in terms of being cones, and it didn't come from Winters, but it's very interesting. You got to get the the Ophanic Revelation,
That,
the Dr.
oh,
Burns's
okay.
book. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So she did that with Vincent Bridges, rest in
Vincent
peace,
Bridges. Yeah.
and of course her husband, who just passed, unfortunately, Ilarion, who presented at our conference
It was really
and
compelling what I was listening
told
to.
an amazing UFO story encounter that he had, and that's great. And hopefully these people are all going to continue teaching us from the beyond.
Yeah.
I've never been since Jake Stratton Kent died. So many people have died. A lot of
Yeah.
I'm just losing everyone I loved,
Ugh, it
and it's
sucks.
crazy. But I've never been using so many people's names that I once knew in my rituals like I am these days, where it's just like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
let's get Sam Scarborough. I'm going to pray to Sam Scarborough. I'm going to pray
Yeah.
to my sister. I'm going to pray to Alarion. I'm
Heck
going to
yeah.
pray to all these people to also attend me and teach me and share with me insights, because all it takes is one flash of an insight for
Yeah.
a breakthrough to occur. And I know the materialist friends in the occult world are like, oh, no one's ever received anything from any of those things. And that's just not true. They're ignoring evidence, which is really frustrating when they ignore evidence. They're like, oh, well, that's one exception. Oh, that's another exception. Oh, that's another exception. Like, how many exceptions do you need to a rule before maybe they're not actual outliers? Maybe
Yeah.
there's just a string of data that we're just marginalizing.
100%. Yeah. Well, all right. So a couple closing questions. I want to ask you, like, if there's any particular favorite texts, or even just teachers in general or individuals that you would recommend to people, and like in terms of their information and like what they're disseminating, the value of what messages can be conveyed and where anybody would find those messages. Um, as far as you're concerned, if you were to direct people into the right location to find valuable information in regards to just reality and like what are some individuals, what are some texts, what are some sources people can go to get a glimpse into this whole fucking reality that we are living in, how we can interact with it and navigate it, things along these lines. What would you recommend? I think you're on mute. Oh, there
Obviously,
you
I've
go.
already
Okay.
preached the virtues of Dr. Litwa's
Litwa.
Hermetica 1.
Mm.
There's some classic texts like Talbot's Holographic Universe, which I guess, if you're not an old guy and that hasn't spent years in your back pocket, that's something to pick up. Some old classics that might be interesting. Well, if you're a Christian or Catholic, there's some classic texts. One of my favorite texts I heard Litwa reference the other day when he did the Aeon Byte podcast, which you guys should check out. The Aeon with Miguel. He did a great interview where really clarifies some of the differences between the beliefs of the Hermetists and the Hermetic community in Alexandria and in that area versus Gnosticism. Because a lot of people still try and think of not Hermetism as a version of Gnosticism, and it's not. Like the Hermetic community, they had a gnosis, they had a Gnostic truth, but that truth isn't what it is in Gnostic religions or Christianities. Like the gnosis in Hermetism is light. It's nous, right? It is, and all you need to become one of the awakened people is to be open to the reality beyond your five senses. That's what's necessary for initiation to begin in the Hermetic sense. Be open to the reality beyond your five senses and the experience of light, not knowing that light is the mystery, but experiencing the mystery. That's the initiation. That is the magic, is the experience of it, not the intellectual knowing of it. So what are you doing to experience it?
Beautiful.
It sort of echoes Nietzsche, right? Man is something to be overcome. What have you done to overcome him?
Yeah.
And
I
the
don't know
word
too
is
much about
mensch, human
Nietzsche,
being.
but
Nietzsche doesn't say man, he says mensch.
Mensch. Okay.
Mensch, which means human being. So German has that. German has also neuter gender. English
Uh,
doesn't, as we all know.
yeah. Outside of my wheelhouse. Nietzsche is somebody that I'm only familiar with to a certain extent, but I haven't really like explored his philosophy in depth, so I don't know too much
Read
about him.
Zarathustra. That's fun. It's poetry. It's beautiful. It's just beautiful.
Zarathustra, is that what it's called?
Yeah, also
Okay.
sprach Zarathustra. I recommend the Hollandale translation. The Hollandale translation is my favorite, though I've been reading the other one, major one. But I first read it in German, and so I have all these passages memorized and think about it in German.
Yeah.
You know, O Mensch, gib acht, was spricht die tiefe Mitternacht? It's so gorgeous. I love
yeah.
German poetry. German poetry is great.
Can
I
you
love
speak?
your challenge of just a book that people should read. I'm still thinking. Go ahead, ask me the question. I'll keep that
I was
percolating.
gonna say, can you like speak like a really dope like Enochian line or like something, I don't know, some cool ass Enochian.
Enochian I use in a very sacred way, but I will say I will. You wanna. I
If
think
it's,
this could be fun.
I don't know if that's like kosher or whatnot, but
Here,
if,
here's something. Here's something you can clip.
okay.
Give you something you can clip. Okay, let me just move that, and so maybe we shouldn't do this.
It's up to you, man. You tell me. I don't know. I'm just trying to, I'm just out
Yeah,
here.
this could be interesting. So Rigardi got the Enochian wrong on the call to the portal, and that's what's published everywhere.
Hmm.
And I always knew it was wrong because when I was in Portal, I researched Dee's guidelines for pronunciation and compared them to Mather's, and noticed that the pronunciation we were using from Rigardi for the call of the portal didn't match either of them,
Oh
right?
shit.
So I was like, oh, there's a problem here. And then eventually I figured out, well, Crowley wrote some original Enochian things and also included a bunch in the back of his Goetia, which of course I had as a teenager. And I was like, how did he come up with the method of doing that? Clearly, he was using the method he learned from the Golden Dawn. He didn't like say, oh, their method of doing Enochian is nonsense. I'm going to change it. No, he just kept doing what he learned from the Golden Dawn, including scrying the and traveling through the aethers. That's from a Golden Dawn paper that just happened to get burned, but we know it existed because it's written about in members' diaries. So, that's where Crowley didn't invent that. But if you look at Crowley and other Golden Dawn members, Enochian, you can see that the method is not as clunky as people like to pretend it is when they lambast the GD tradition. So we would normally say, "Oel sonu feor saji goho yada balta lexor pehe komananu tabituem zodakara eka zodakara odo o zodomeranu odo kikle qua pia pe pia moel odo veoanu." Right? That's what we would say.
Okay.
That's what I did in Kelly's Tower, and it worked.
All right.
But this is actually what the original Golden Dawn would have said. I'll do it slowly because I haven't memorized the new method. I have been working with it though. So the way they pronounced it was Oel Sonef Vaorski Gohu Iad Balt El Exarp Komanan Tabitom Zodakar Eka Od Zoda Mernu Oudo Kikle Kahaya Pi Ape Pia Moel Od Va Oam. I might have skipped a line, but you get the idea. Slightly different. So they're not adding a vowel to every single letter. If there's no need to add the vowel, they didn't. And that's what they called the short form. I think Nick Farrell actually goes over this sort of stuff, but he doesn't give this example that I just gave you. So there's a classic example of how someone who didn't really get taught something did the best they could. And we've all, hundreds and thousands of people have been following that rather than looking to see if it was right. And so that's exciting. There's always these new little developments. We're always finding ways to improve our ritual work, whether it's by going back to older documents and techniques or not. Well, who was I talking? Yeah, it's an exciting time. Whether
Yeah.
you're studying the Hermetica, Golden Dawn tradition with Frater Yekida putting out all the original teachings. So, a lot of people are going to be shocked by the original Golden Dawn initiations, be like, wait, I thought the original ones would be cooler than the Stella Matutina ones. It's like, you thought they would be, but
Well, here's the reality check.
most people I know prefer the SM ones.
Yeah.
Maybe that's because Yeats had a hand in modifying the poetry of them a bit. A lot of people think that's not the case. Who knows? But there's definitely virtues in all of them. There's definitely good qualities in all of them. And so, we have more options, more pluralism and variety going on today. And I think we have a pretty healthy community that exists these days, and that's exciting. So a lot of opportunities and a lot more bridges being built, which is really what the big goal of the early 2000s was, to like, hey, let's put aside the nonsense and actually start to think about, building healthy relationships and communities where people can have a good time.
What would be, if you were to recommend to listeners, just like any messages, any like words of wisdom, regardless of who they came from or whatever they may be, what would you put out there for people that you feel like maybe something that you would wish that you could have heard or could hear, at least at this time, for people to be inspired by and maybe ruminate on and contemplate for their own individual journey and exploration into these things?
I guess the thing that it really, really does sadden me to see how many people never understand what's possible with the practices we do and with the path that we follow if they took it seriously, if they took the time to really, really invest themselves in it. They see it as about status or about credibility or about power. And it just isn't. Life's too short for that. And all you need to do to meditate, like, is just sit there in silence or focus on a point on the wall. That's fine. That can take you as far as you need to go. So if you're going to be involved in more complex systems of spirituality or religion, and I do see those things as basically the same thing, you make sure it's about creating a healthy community around you and fostering good and healthy relationships with people. Don't see them as utilities. And like the amount of evil things, like the reason you've heard me be grumpy, as you say on my podcast, is because of the unending deluge and attacks against me. Like right after I did EnokiaCon,
Absolutely.
Ike was being sent videos of me in the hospital after I'd been beaten by someone threatening him to not participate anymore. And those videos were being sent to other people as well. And I got renewed death threats and doxings. My address is posted everywhere, being told that, my mom will be run over by a car and killed just like they killed my sister. And some of these people are the heads of Golden Dawn orders who are doing
Holy
this.
fuck, dude.
Yeah, these are evil people who are murderers and rapists, and they do not belong in our community. So people need to be aware of that these people out there, and stop facilitating them. Stop facilitating them. And they are, and you know who you are doing it. The people out there know who they are, propping them up for money or power. And it's horrible. And those people need to stop, because I don't think they realize the price they will pay one day if they do not get themselves right with the Lord, so to speak. Like, seriously, I think they've maybe gone too far, but you haven't gone too far. That's the whole idea of Christ and Jesus, is you don't need to be a Christian to realize that you can actually always repent for what you've done and get right with things. We all can do that. And these people who think that it's okay just to destroy other people's lives. Me and my family were silent from 2007 up until 2017, when my mom and sister said, yeah, fine, you can participate in the occult world again. At this point, we don't care what happens to us.
Fuck.
because it's gone too far. They wouldn't leave us alone even when we were silenced. So to the head of Zaleski's order who raped my sister, burn in hell, Martin. You fucking piece of shit. Hiding out in Malta. Burn in hell. And to everyone propping him up and publishing his name in books, he's an evil man. And he's threatened us so many times. And the people who robbed me and took all my property, the governments support criminals. We know this. We know the governments support criminals no matter what. They will do anything in Canada to protect rapists. So that's what people need to be aware of.
I'm with you, dude. And I'm gonna publish it. You know, maybe some people would take that out. I'm not going to take it out.
Cut that out if you want.
No, I'm gonna leave it in.
You asked, you pushed me.
I respect it, and I think it's important, and I think that people don't shy away from like drawing attention to these fucking fuck faces that are doing these sort of things, and I respect you for standing up and like putting your voice out there and actually like voicing your perspective and your opinion on these things, because that is what, in my mind, people need to be doing more of. And I think that people are becoming very shy, and it's kind of sad when you see injustices where people feel like they have no outlet to be able to express their experiences with reality, their realities, and the things that have occurred, and the fucking fucked up shit that has happened to them, and they feel like they have no stand, or they have no voice for these things. So I just think that it's cool, because I've listened to a lot of your different podcasts. I've listened to a lot of the interviews that you've done, and you're not like one of these guys that goes on there and you're like into this like sort of like woke culture thing where you're like trying to like be all inclusive of all this bullshit or whatever. Like, you're just like speaking, you know, your reality and your truth and like what you believe in, and it's like refreshing. And I'm like, fucking goddamn, thank God. Like,
you don't have to virtue signal if you actually care about virtues.
Yes.
Like I love my trans friends, and I live in the gay village, and I have, you know, the yeah, no,
yeah, it's like, it's also, you know, there's a lot of really cool trans people out there, and like a lot of cool gay people that are like,
they hate this woke
into
stuff as well.
Exactly.
They hate the PC, and we used to just call it PC, which was a better term for it, because it highlighted the political aspect of it. This is again, it's a tool of people who want to control us.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I've been a radical lefty my whole life. I still vote socialist here in Vancouver. I probably won't this next election for the first time, but that's their fault.
I don't know shit
That's
about
their fault.
Canadian politics,
you know,
but
they're not letting us build home. To build a new home here costs $850,000 in permits alone.
That's preposterous.
So they don't want us having families. They don't want us being alive. They want us having medical assistance and dying, where we slowly drown to death from this pill that we take. That's what they want, and they're denying us food, shelter, and medicine to force us into it. It's the death drive I mentioned before. There is like, I don't believe that there's like demons ruling our world secretly. Maybe there are, but I don't think so. But we don't need the demons to rule the world. People are perfectly capable of that kind of evil on their own.
Yeah.
Why? Because they get immediate gratification, and they get, like, the evilest people get seen as these great people. Look what just happened with Neil Gaiman and Amanda Palmer, right? Like, basically the Jeffrey and Ghislaine of the music and publishing world. Like, shocking. I'm going to post the pictures that I have of me hanging out with them on Twitter tomorrow, and be like, I guess these didn't age well, because they sure did not. Because that man is despicable, and I believe in, you know, you need to prove guilt for sure, but the evidence is truly overwhelming. Check out Jason Louve's live stream on it. Shout out to Jason Louve. Love that man. Hopefully he did say he'll come on the podcast sometime soon, but I don't know how to get in touch with him. I don't know how to
Yeah.
reach him if anyone else does. And whatever, doesn't matter. I invited him to a Nokia con last year. He never even saw the message on Facebook, so it's like
I
whatever.
think
He's
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 got
he's a celebrity. We don't have many occult celebrities, and we need the ones we do have. So as
yeah.
long as they keep doing their true will, that's all good.
Yeah, I
But
think
yeah,
probably got a lot going on. Dude,
shocking.
I'd love to see someone like yourself or Ike on Rogan, which I don't know. Maybe it's like high hopes. Um,
Lube would be the guy. His history is not as strong as I wish it was. Like, he
I
was
like,
saying on
yeah,
he was on Dave Rubin's Tetragrammaton podcast, and
I know
Dave
Lou.
Rubin's the greatest music producer of all time. And he
Yeah,
was talking about like the Hermetica being thousands of years old. It's like technically like 1700, 1800, maybe older, but like, he's not,
yeah.
he's more a journalist, and I like that. So he's the one who should go on
He's
Rogan,
got really good. I
or
like his stuff on like D and all that, and I
who
love
else would be
listening
a
to
good
him on
person?
Duncan Trussell. And Duncan Trussell is probably like the best
Yeah.
dude that's on Rogan consistently, and he's like one
Trussell's
of my,
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, that's that's my jam as well. I don't watch many guests on Rogan because yeah, and I don't have a lot of crossover interests with with Rogan, but I watch for a lot of guests. There's some really good. There's like the nutrition ones that come on sometimes
Mhm.
are amazing. Have really made changes in my life. Like I didn't realize that the receptors for caffeine aren't active in your brain for the first 90 minutes. So there's no. That's why people think that their second cup of coffee is the one that kicks in. No. The first cup of coffee is just draining you of fluids and making you actually tired because your brain receptors, you drink water and eat salt and fat in the morning, and then your brain actually comes to life. And that's been a game changer for me and helped me be more active in the morning. So, yeah, things like that are great. But who would be the best occult guest on Rogan? That's the question. That's the question we're asking right now. Whose would be the best? Lon, maybe. Lon could be good. They'd have
Mine would be
fun.
good. Yeah. It would have to be someone that appeals to his sort of
The
style.
best would have been Jake Kent.
Yeah,
Jake Strike Kent. That would
unfortunately.
have been the
Yeah.
funnest. That would have been the wildest. Yeah.
Yeah. But like I don't know. I heard him talking to Brian Morozku, and they were mentioning PD Newman and whatnot. You know, I don't know. There's a lot of good guys. I would like personally. I would like to hear you. I'd like to hear Ike. That's my personal little wish.
Me and
That's-
Icon Rogan, yeah. We would that would be that would I mean that'll
Yeah.
never happen, but
It'll
you never
probably
say
not
never,
happen.
but no,
But
I mean it's a like he's not interested in that stuff. Maybe he will be after the
well,
telepathy tapes
but
come out, but
like I feel like with the trajectory of exploration and like right now, okay, he's opened up the door and he's like getting into the biblical interpretation and whatnot. He's got this like Wes Huff guy on. He's gonna obviously be having on people that have various different alternative perspectives, having these debates, getting into this territory of like this spiritual exploration of these ancient texts and whatnot. And like ultimately, at least where that road leads, if you're anybody that's like having the trajectory of truth and like focusing in on that, which I feel like if he's honest,
I'd like to see him like actually, who I'd like is I'd like to see if he was going to talk to occultists, I would or esoteric scholars even. Like
Yeah.
the people I'd like to see Rogan talk to would be like Hanegraaff or
Walter Hanegraaff, yeah.
even Dr. Puka because she's
Yeah.
she's like she knows the shaman stuff
Mhm.
and she's got a very wide range of knowledge and skills that would be interesting for Rogan, but also
Sledge.
even more so than them. What?
I was gonna say Sledge maybe would appeal.
Sledge could be fun with Rogan, but Sledge sort of writes off some of the nuances of practice. Like he's an expert he wrote his master's on Enochian, and I tried to ask him what he thought of like this debate with the ring and the tool. Because I was like, oh, you've studied this. What would you think? Like, should it be written, should the letters in the ring be written in English? Or what do you think of the argument to write them in Enochian? And he responded, you may as well write them in Klingon. I'm like, okay, well then we're not even.
Yeah.
That's really funny. That is funny, but like I'm looking for someone who's interested in manuscript variances. That's what I'm interested in when I ask that question. What do you think of manuscript variances and variances between the tradition of the Solomonic ring? Because it's a
Right.
Solomonic ring. So, and then sure enough, Dr. Burns comes along and be like, oh, no, it's really important. It's written in English, and here's why. And you're like, giddy up. So that's amazing. Another Jocelyn Godwin. Jocelyn Godwin could go on Rogan. He would be one of my favorite people to go on Rogan because he's a musicologist who's also one of the leading experts in the history of, Rosicrucianism and all of these theosophy and all this stuff, right? He would be he must be pretty old by now, though. I got to have lunch with him in 2004, but he must be old now. I don't know.
Well, is there anything that you feel like just like any random important pieces of information or any
I
additional?
think I've spilt enough tea here tonight, don't you?
I'm
I mean,
so-
there's definitely more
I'm
random
grateful.
things I
This
could
was
say.
a really enjoyable one for me, so I'm like super
It's definitely going to get shared a few times, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Frater R.C. I think people should
Okay.
explore his work. I haven't read his book Holy Diamond, but I finally got a copy of it right here. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've got a great copy too. This is a really nice copy of
I just
Frater
got a
R.C.
number
because
of
because it's a similar. He didn't do Liber Samech. He didn't do the Golden Dawnway. He didn't do the Abramelin. He came up with his own approach coming out of the Imbolc school where he was trained, which is amazing. And yeah, you'll love this. I actually have, and it turns out it's actually a signed copy, but it's actually signed to Larry from Miskatonic Books.
Oh,
So
that's
Larry
awesome.
sold me his copy,
I
and
think that
I
he's
told
done
him
some.
I told him it will be in very good hands. And now that it's been possessed, it's been in the ownership of two Golden Dawn adepts, and so whoever gets it when I die will have a special copy from Frater R.C. to Larry of Miskatonic, to me, and to whoever gets it when I pass on from this
Absolutely.
mortal coil. And I'm a big fan of. I'm obviously a big fan of Frater R.C. I've got also his. This was still smells deeply of the incense from his library. And so, yeah, absolutely gorgeous and beautiful book. I like his work very much.
Yeah, I think he's
I've written to
done.
him several times to ask him if he would podcast with me, and I want to do half the podcast in German, but he just leaves me on red. I think he thinks I'm a far right extremist because that's what so many people like to say about anyone these days.
Yeah.
Dude, so many people have come on my podcast, and right afterwards they're like, "Yep, I knew it. He's a neo-Nazi." It's like, why are you doing that? Just for clout? Just for clout and shit? And it's like, yeah, that's exactly why they're doing that.
Yeah.
I have people pay me for my time just to do a one-on-one session with me and just insult me.
That's fucking
People will
amazing.
pay me $150 just to call me names and tell me I'm a piece of shit.
That's well worth it though. I'd let people pay me for
Well,
that as well.
I mean, I hang up and refund them. I shouldn't necessarily refund them, but otherwise they backcharge you anyway.
Yeah.
It's crazy. People are nuts. The world's a crazy place, and if you do what we do, you're gonna get lambasted no matter what you do or what you say. And so I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I am not.
Absolutely, dude. And I highly respect you, and I appreciate all of your work, your podcast, your information that you put out there, your voice. I think it's really like invaluable to people that are interested in these sort of things, and like you can't really find a whole lot of that because there's just not a whole lot of people like you that have had your experience, and I am greatly indebted and appreciative of people like yourself. So personally, just want to thank you, and I honor your work, and I am here to support what you're doing, and will continue
Thank
to
you.
do so. So,
Well, we're gonna have a fun year, right? We're gonna do a lot of things, and
yeah,
hopefully a lot of people check out Enokia Con, come to join the Arcane Research Society, and help us build a thriving annual conference, and followed by a
yes,
retreat, which we've this is the second year of it already, and we're gonna have a good time. Vancouver is a beautiful city, and your money's gold here right now. So not only will everything be cheaper than expected, including the conference for you, but it's just a great town. with
Yeah.
a lot of fun stuff to do. So the natural beauty is unbelievable. So hopefully we can get people, and even attending online, it's going to be great either way. We're going to do it all very professionally and have a good show. And I can't wait to see what happens with, Aaron Leach in the mix, and hopefully the other guests accept as well the invitations. And there's room for people to sign up to present. If you want to present at Enokia Con, there is room for presenters. So there's no application form. You knowing how to propose and present it is a big part of the application. So just send in your applications, and we'd love to have people come to Vancouver and contribute.
Fuck yeah.
Something on related to the studies of Dee and Kelly, or any of the tributaries to or from them. So that can encompass a lot, right? It's not actually that restricted. It's just that's our linchpin, or what's that stone that you put in the top of the arch, that lintel stone. There's this one stone that you need, and then the other ones stay up in a crescent. I can't remember. I do love archaeology and all that art history. It's absolutely wonderful. I could recommend one more thing that people could get into, and that's it's I guess it's still, I think it's still published. I love Reverend Zemi. I'm a Tahutian. I love Thoth and Hermes, of course. So I use this book a lot, the prayer book, the Litanies of Thoth. Yeah, it's still in print. It's not sold out. His Book of Flesh and Feather is, but this isn't, and it is a gem. So if you want a little prayer to Thoth every day, including it follows the Egyptian calendar, I absolutely adore it. It's right here. I use it all the time, and there's a general invocation, and a shout out to Reverend Zemi, who I just think is a beautiful, beautiful guy and doing amazing work, along with Jack Rail and Sam Davis. Of course, they're quite the coterie.
Yeah. Well, is there any last thoughts, or any places you'd like to point people to in terms of your own projects that you've got going on, your website, whatever? How would you like to direct people to listen to more about yourself?
Yeah,
like that.
The best thing to do to find out about what I'm up to is to join my free cyber guild at hermeticmysteryschool.com. You can find that also through hermeticpodcast.com, and you can join the email list or just join the free cyber guild, which has a bunch of recordings from previous free meetings. And I have a lecture coming up this Sunday. It's a half-hour lecture followed by 20-minute Q&A chat about the goddess Bri, or Bridget, Saint Bridget. And I, unlike most occult authors out there, I'm presenting from verified historical sources, not 90s New Age publications, which I love. However, it's nice to know what the historical texts have said about that goddess, Christianized though they surely are. And we do not have any traces of their pre-Christian interpretation, but we can extrapolate. So Bridget's amazing goddess. Ireland's an amazing culture. And so come celebrate that with me this Sunday if this podcast is out by then. If not, join the Cyber Guild anytime, hermeticmysteryschool.com. We're doing lots of stuff. And of course, I have a course for people who want to study the Golden Dawn tradition as self-initiates. And that's going like gangbusters. That's going great with the students. Everyone's doing great in it. And it's way better than I thought it could ever be. So, the universe is the universe responds well when you do what you're meant to do.
Absolutely. Amen to that. I appreciate you greatly. And anytime you're always welcome on my podcast. So
thank you, brother.
Perhaps until next
time. It's been a pleasure.
Man. Appreciate
this
you.
has been a lot of fun, and I look forward to enjoying more of your episodes. The Tobias Churton was quite the adventure. And what's your favorite podcast you've done?
I would say it's probably one of the ones that were the most interesting to me would probably be like David Hyman Smith or something like that. He's just
That's right. You talk to him.
Yeah, he's just a mind blower. Like you talk to him and you're just just trying to converse with him in his own language is a fun experiment on its own, because he's just a fascinating communicator. And before I did it, I tried to kind of familiarize myself with a lot of his linguistic style, and his understanding of how he conceives of things. And so it made for a really interesting conversation, at least for me personally. And so it's funny because I continue to be fascinated by his work, but I realize that it's kind of on a different octave than, because I have like Golden Dawn studies over here, and then David's creation of like what he conceives of as his system is like a conglomeration of like a two or three different systems of occult philosophy that he kind of compiles together, and he has his own language and his own sort of framework of how he views and interprets things, and I feel like it's 100% valid and true, but it's something that I like check in with occasionally, but I can't hang in that realm consistently. Like, it would distract from my focus on what I'm doing over here, because his framework and how he systematizes and categorizes things is a little bit different than like the GD structure of things. So it can become a little bit confusing, but I like highly respect his work and I love everything that he has to say. So, yeah.
Me too. Me too. I mean, I've got almost all his books, and I love that man. Aleph is Aleph is Aleph, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's just you got to keep that in mind. Like that's just such an important point that took me years of practice to sort of really, really inherently know within my bones. But he just puts it there front and center. Like, look, you can experiencing the Ein Sof at any point from anywhere at any time. You don't need to see things in this hierarchical structure of development. Those are heuristics that are very helpful,
Yeah.
but you're none of us is further or closer to God in a truly internal ontological sense of source. We're all equally connected with source, and that's why I love the Hermetic point of view of like, look, just open yourself up to those forces of nature and you will start to see beyond what you thought was real. And David Hinesmith charts with his esoteric cartography the contours of deep mystical experience in a way that very few people can articulate. And that makes his work so valuable. And well, of course, when you read the Fountain of Wisdom, right, the 13th century Kabbalistic text, he sort of comes out of that school of thought. Then his where he's coming from makes a lot more sense. His interpret
Oops.
his inclusion of alchemy, or as some people call it, spiritual alchemy, into that Kabbalistic framework is very powerful and makes it much more communicable to the modern esotericists like us than it would otherwise be.
Yeah, and then there was another book that he is very fond of that I've heard you mention as well, which is The Cloud of Unknowing. That was something that I forgot. I was going to ask you about that one.
Well,
it seems very interesting.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. Evelyn Underhill, a fellow Golden Dawner like you and I, she wrote an introduction to it and did a version of it that's very, very worthwhile checking out. But The Cloud of Unknowing is a great Christian mystical text, and it shows that there's a historical Christian practice identical to what we used to think of as being exclusively Eastern meditation or yoga, right? So it's like, no, we have these traditions in the West. You don't need to keep going and drawing from Eastern practices, and conflating them, well, nothing frustrates me more than people who are talking about Hermeticism or Hermetism, and then they start explaining in terms of these Eastern things like, Vipassana or whatever. It's like, well, what Hermes meant is similar to the Vipassana. It's like, what are you talking about? It has nothing to do with Vipassana. Nothing in the West has to do with Indian or Hindu practices. I grew up Hindu in hearing Bhagavad Gita, following Maharishi, and that's what we did. And it just didn't really deeply connect. The meditation practice worked. The ritual invocations in the initiations when I was 7 and 10 years old, those worked. I noticed what they did. But so did my cousin in Missouri when I was 10. begging me through tears to accept Jesus into my heart. And then something went into my heart. I don't know if it was Jesus, but it was something. And, lo and behold, 9 years later, I converted, had a full on conversion experience. So, like, I don't know if that was the seed planted when I was 10, when he's like, please, I can't go to sleep unless you accept Jesus in my heart. It's like, okay, I accept Jesus in my heart. And like, all of a sudden, it was like this light shot into me. I was like, oh, fuck. What did I just do?
Damn.
Uh-oh.
Okay, let me ask you before you sign off. Let me ask you then, what was one of your most impactful episodes that you've recorded, or like your guests that you've interviewed, that you feel like was like a pretty like shifting perspective for you?
A transformative episode for me. I think probably one of the biggest were Daniel Rekshan, who's American living here in BC, and he presented at a NokiaCon last year as well. And he's doing all this work into dreams, and he's running DSETI, the Dream Search for Extraterrestrial Life. And he's been an Enochian magician, put out the Book of Galactic Light. He used all the Enochian calls out in the middle of nowhere of British Columbia to work with UFOs and extra dimensional somethings. Anyway, if you're doing a Nokia and UFOs are showing up, I mean, you got my blessing. I'm curious. Tell me more. Take me out into the field. Let's get busy. And he even recently burned all of his Enochian tools because the spirits told him they were not done quite right. And I recently had to get rid of an Enochian table I made because they're like, I made a home version of one that was 2 foot by 2 foot that I thought would be like more portable, and they weren't having it. They weren't having it.
Yeah.
And I get such concrete results from Enochian magic, like shockingly concrete results when I get it. It's crazy. It's absolutely nuts. So when they tell me to not do something or to change something, I've learned to listen. Yeah, even if I don't understand it. That's the Kierkegaardian leap of faith.
Yeah. Well, this has been amazing. I greatly appreciate you. And
Thank you so much for having me on, Frater.
Yeah. We'll do another one, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, fuck yeah. Absolutely. We'll talk about adrenochrome.
Yeah,
I'm joking. I'm joking. Those were always jokes. Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah, the lockdown years were rough. 3 years of lockdown, man.
Oh God.
3 years for us. Not for everyone up here, just for second class people.
Yeah, not fun. Frater RC, the Hermetic podcast. Check it out. And until next time, brother.
Peace and love.